Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I'd like to, before we start the roll call, we'd like to add a member to our roll call, and it's William Mockley, who's going to be our student representative, representing the students of North Kingston. We welcome you, and we're very happy to have you. Okay, so roll call, Karen. Belvoir Benson?
Here.
April Brunel? Here. Larry Cerisi? Here. Renee Cockrell? Francis? Here. Kimberly Page? Here. Douglas Roth?
Hello.
William Brennan? William Markley?
Here.
Okay. The calendar. On September 10th, there will be an open house at Fishing Cove for grades kindergarten and 1 at 6:30 p.m. On September 11th, there will be an open house at Fishing Cove for grades 2 and 3 at 6:30. There will be an open house at Forest Park at 7, and a Consolidation of Services Committee meeting at 4:30 at the Administration Building. On September 12th, there will be a Budget Subcommittee meeting at 9 a.m. at the Administration Building. On September 16th, there will be a Policy Subcommittee meeting at 9 a.m. in the Administration Building. On Wednesday, September 17th, an open house at Wickford Middle School at 6:30 p.m. On September 18th, an open house at Davisville Elementary at 6 p.m. On September 23rd, there will be a school committee business meeting at 7 p.m. at the Central Administration Building. On September 25th, an open house at Davisville Middle School at 6:30 p.m. On Sunday, September 28th, there's the second annual Fly Like an Eagle 5K road race at Forest Park at 3 p.m. And on Tuesday, September 30th, there will be no school in observance of Rosh Hashanah, and a Facilities Management and Planning Subcommittee meeting at 6:30 in the Central Administration Building.
Karen, what day was that again for the facilities?
Facilities is on the 30th at 6:30. Yeah, I've been going through all this every year. Thank you. Does anyone have anything else they need to add to that?
Yes, we have the 42nd Street Musical coming up this weekend. It's on Friday at, I believe, 7 p.m., and on Saturday at 7 p.m., and on Sunday at 2 p.m. So I know one of our neighbors is in it, and she's told me that it's a very good show over at the high school. So, Doug, I heard you have something that we're all supposed to get.
Yeah, I do, and I'll be hold on to it to correspond.
Okay.
I just want to add to the musical that's going to be at the high school Sunday. It has generated a lot of enthusiasm throughout the community, and quite a few groups are planning to come Sunday to the matinee. And I think it's nice because it gives the citizens a different view, and they can see what the children are actually doing. But some of them seem to think the price was a little high. So let's keep the good activities going, but let's remember, when we're pricing things, we don't price them, I told them, but we'll have to get that through to the faculty and the people. We know they have to pay for the copyrights and all of that, but things like that really put a different spin on our schools. So I just wanted you to know that it is great enthusiasm, and I will be there Sunday for the matinee with about 8 women. We call ourselves the Poor Widows.
I believe the price is only $8 if you get them early, and $10 to get them at the door, and that is cheaper than going to the movies.
It is, but when you're a poor war widow, $8 and electric bill, that's quite a bit. So we will be there. We all pin it up.
Spencer, we're happy to know that the Drama Club provided the committee and a couple of extra folks, if we want to, with free tickets. I'll give you yours now. Should be all set. I was going to wait for correspondence, but it's probably appropriate to do that now.
get these,
So 8 to 10, you'll be all set.
This Sunday?
I think it's good anytime you want to go.
Oh, thank you, Chairman Roth. These women will be glad.
Oh, she's a chairman. Well, each of the committee members get one. But you know what? I'm going to be going, but I'll be happy to give you my 3.
Oh, no, they don't want to.
No, please, that's great.
They're independent.
No, that's fine. There's a couple extra ones here. Oh,
But I have 2. I'll give these to.
Thank you.
That was just food for thought concerning the schools and its activities.
Okay. Presentations. I believe the CLAC presentation will not be being presented, but we have a written presentation, Karen?
Yes, it's in, under the consent agenda to be approved. Have the written part of it.
Okay. Okay, any questions or?
Let's go to citizens' comments. That's on the consent agenda, further down on the agenda.
This is?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we can go to citizens' comments.
Okay, so we'll move to citizens' comments on that, because this is there?
Yeah, it's further down on the consent agenda, right there.
Okay, all right. Citizens' comments, please? So this is the end of the year report. Okay.
My name is Tammy LaRaza.
Just speak into the mic, please, and restate your name.
My name is Tammy LaRaza. I was advised to come here after speaking with Rachel Santa. I had a few issues that I'd like to discuss, mostly pertaining to my son, who has an IAP, has a few learning disabilities. Some of you know my son John. Unfortunately, he's made some bad decisions in his life and ended up running away from home last year and ended up in Massachusetts in the training school and then here in the training school. A lot of people from the high school did write letters on John's behalf, which we were very grateful for, to try to help him get out early. He ended up spending almost 6 months there. When he did get out, he was supposed to play. He's an all-around athlete, has been since he was 8 years old. He was supposed to play for the town. He was all signed up for the town. Unfortunately, he got out 3 days after the high school had already finished their tryouts, but he was looking forward so much to playing for the town. He was all set, like I said, to play, and all of a sudden, maybe because, I believe because he came from the training school, he was put on the waiting list and never got to play. He's 16 years old. This was his last year to play. Since he's been back at the high school, the end of last year, when he first left, before he ran away, he was hardly ever here for the first couple of weeks. And then he spent time, like I said, in the training school, and 2 weeks in Mass, when he got to the training school down here, they immediately put him into school, and he did excellent for them. Unfortunately, he was 10 days shy of what they call their quarters, which run differently than most school systems. So they did say, he was doing well and passing, but there's no official grades for him. And so then he came back to the high school. He got out March 18th, came back to the high school, it was a rough transition for my son Jonathan, because he didn't know where he fit in. Kids can be cruel, and it was not easy for him when he was in the training school. He was attacked a couple of times. Unfortunately, that does happen there. So it took him a while to get over that and try to settle back down. And second quarter in the training school, A's and B's. He did excellent. He came back to the high school. His grades started to slide a bit, but he was still getting A's, B's, and C's. Fourth quarter, he evidently nosedived, was cutting classes left and right. He has an IEP. Part of his IEP is that we're to be notified. We were never notified. Jonathan works with the KEY program, and then he also works with Project Hope. Part of the KEY program, which is out of the probation department, part of their job is to come to the high school every week and check on the status of whether it's half a dozen to a dozen children that they deal with, checking on them academically, if they're behaving themselves, cutting classes, whatever. The woman from the KEY program, Colleen, it was never mentioned that John was not going to classes, was failing, and just did a total nosedive. Unfortunately, we did not find out about it until I came to the school looking for his report card, because they said, well, he owed books, which they did find in his resource class. So I was shocked when I saw his report card that, he had failed a good amount of his classes. But by the time I found that out, summer school had already started. So then I was directed through the calling from the KEY program to speak with Rachel Santa. And calling from the KEY program thought, 'cause John really wanted to play football this year. He had gone to weight training during the summer, not as often as he should have, but he didn't know whether he was going to get to play or not, because he was told no, he wouldn't, because of academically it wasn't acceptable. I'm sorry if I lose my train of thought. So what Colleen from the KEY program thought for football, what they could do is take his three-quarter grades, even though he had not done well in the fourth quarter at all, and combine them, just average them out, just so he was able to participate with the football team, which unfortunately, because he was in the training school last year, he did not get to. That has always been, for my son, sports, a great motivator. Rachel Santa had told me that there would be no exceptions made. He was ineligible. No exceptions would be made. Through other correspondence and other people that I know for a fact that there have been exceptions made more than once. Going back 3 or 4 years, there were 2 girls on a softball team that were caught smoking pot on the back of the school bus after a game. They were suspended, which...
Can I just want to, I don't mean to be rude. Carol. Can I ask what you're asking of this committee?
I'd like to know, for one thing, why exceptions have been made in the past.
So are you asking this committee to find out whether or not he can be on the football team? Is that okay?
Well, that's part
Have
of it.
you spoken to Dr. Thornton, the superintendent, yet?
No, because Rachel Sanders and the high school had told me my only recourse at this point would be to
Okay,
come here.
I think that it's out of order for you to be discussing this in an open session, and I think that there are other steps that you need to take first, like, for example, having a meeting with the superintendent, and then we can follow through and sitting down and looking at his IEP and seeing what it says, checking with the Interscholastic League, those kinds of things. I don't think that the committee in open session this evening can even address your question. So if you just make sure that Dr. Thornton has your name and your concern, we'll look into it tomorrow, but the committee, this is just citizens' comments.
I understand that.
So they can't really even address it, but but we'd be more than willing to look at the situation tomorrow and get an answer back to you. I don't want, in other words, if you just continue to go on, you're not going to get an answer tonight. So we'd be more than happy if you give Dr. Thornton your name, we'll follow through.
Okay.
But this committee can't make a decision and basically would just direct the superintendent to meet with you anyway.
Okay, which, like I said, Rachel
Thank
Sanders
you.
told me this is my only recourse.
Yeah.
Larry, and then April.
That's nobody gets
Just wanna say-
Just your phone names. I can get it.
Madam Chair,
Just a couple of, a quick comment, and pretty much to reiterate what Mary Ann just said. Just Thank you. Miss, just to reiterate what Attorney Carroll just said, the first step, as she said, would be to meet privately with the superintendent, and if you can't have it, find a solution at that point, then we could request a closed executive session with the school committee, and it'll be a private meeting with just you and the school committee members, and we could hopefully dive into further detail.
I wish Rachel had told me
No, that's
that.
fine, that's fine. I just wanted to kind of outline the process for you so we can kind of streamline things.
Thank
So, you're welcome.
April, I just wanted to comment to her that I'm really sorry that you got sent into the wrong direction. You know, I think that's a point that needs to be made, and in the future,
Exactly.
if, you know, the principal and they sent you to this direction, we need to clarify that. So I apologize for that miscommunication. No?
Continuing on in the vein that Mrs. Brunel has said, Dr. Thurman, I think you should, and I know the committee, some of them would agree, that Mrs. Santos, if she's a member of our faculty and school staff, and sent this mother on this trail without giving her the right directions, and I'm sorry that she did that. And to our attorney, I think, I don't know, I didn't go to law school, but I think we can ask questions when parents come to the meeting under the open meeting law. And I want all of you to know on this committee and the ones in the audience, no parent, whether it's at the high school or anywhere, and this was a great thing for this mother to come here and stand in front of 9 or 10 people that she didn't know. So, Dr. Thornton, thank you for meeting with her, and I would suggest that a letter of recommend be put in Miss Santos's jacket if she
Okay,
did
just,
that.
now, first of all, we don't know exactly what transpired, but we're happy that the parent was able
Okay,
to
let's
come
don't
and have
wash
a
it
meeting
over,
for
Janice.
tomorrow.
This
We're not
moment-
washing over, you don't have both sides of it right now. It's Doug. And
Thank you, Dr. Francis. Again, thank you for coming out tonight. Takes a lot of courage to stand up
It really
and discuss your family issues. I for one, appreciate that very much. I would ask if we could put on either the next agenda or a very soon agenda a discussion of the special ed program and its outreach. What I heard from the comments tonight that ties into something that we also heard publicly lately is that there's a lack of touch with our out-of-district placements. I think the issue with the district hitting the watch list was because of kneecap testing, and it might have been because a few kids weren't contacted or managed that were out of district. I'm hearing this also, that kids are not necessarily being communicated or tracked appropriately, and I would ask that this school committee go ahead and raise the issue, maybe if it's an executive session, wherever it has to be, but I'm concerned that we're losing track of the kids that drift out of the district a little bit. I think that should be brought in with the special ed director.
now,
You're absolutely right, Mr. Roth, and I agree with you.
Thank you.
And I will maintain that Dr. Thornton speak with Mrs. Santos and get her, because I don't think this poor mother came out here tonight and didn't nobody send her here. Because we have got to have compassion for people. And if this is the kind of committee we got, and what we are going to do, I know you're right, attorney, but I'm not stopping till I say what I want, because my heart bleeds for her. I don't know if from Adam's house cat, and for a mother to come in here in front of all these people and lay all of that out, somebody had to send her here. So that's what I want to say. And I would like a report of your meeting with Mrs. Santos for the whole school committee. Dr. Thornton.
thank you.
Treat her
And
that
we will
like that.
set up so they'll be called tomorrow. Okay, thank you. All right, citizens' comments.
You're right, you don't do that.
Jim McGuinn, 412 Chilling Rock. First of all, Madam Chair, I'd like to give you a email that I sent you previously, I don't know if I have your right email address, and it concerns consent agenda and exempting something from the consent agenda, and the fact that, and I quoted Robert's Rules here, 10th edition, that the matters listed in the consent agenda are taken up unless objected to, in which case they are restored to the ordinary process by which they were placed on in line for consideration. And this really translates into the common practice, including our own North Kingston Town Council, that any board member, any member of the public or director may request that a consent agenda be placed on the regular agenda.
Thank you.
The next thing I wanted to just make note of is the school committee's interscholastic activities policy, IGDJ. And among other things, on the second page, item 7, in part it relates, a detailed encumbrance accounting system shall be maintained by the high school principal and athletic director, and a monthly financial statement, including revenues, expenditures, and encumbrances, and unencumbrances, balances, shall be submitted to the superintendent not later than the first Monday of each month. Coaches of each sport shall submit their budgetary needs to the athletic director for the next school year, and the latter will present the total athletic budget request to the principal for inclusion in the general budget. We've had, at the past several meetings, a number of issues that show up on the consent agenda that have not been routine, and the last one with the athletic bid, it took about 30 minutes of discussion. This is also the issue of a APRA that asked for this information, and it's in your own policies. It's not a work product. It's in your own policies that this should be done, and I'm not sure it's being done. And I think that part of what we see tonight in the consent agenda, yet again, items G5 and G6, we have stipends. And this has come up in the past 3 years, and I think Mrs. Benson has said it on a number of occasions. You have 2.5 pages of 5-page agenda of stipends that are in essence, you're just doing a ministerial function. These people are already in place. In fact, on the sports camps, they're already over, and they've already been paid. So, and it's happened year after year, and in fact, on the sports camps, you got a budget of $38,077, and when you add up what was approved in May and what's approved on this, you have $39,000, so you're over budget. So, just by those facts, it should not be on the consent agenda, because you're over budget. What was put in the financial budget approved by the town council. There's also a question that the audit committee is going to be handling, is our sports camps covered under the pay for play in the state? There is an issue there that the audit committee is coming up. So I don't think this belongs in the consent agenda. I think neither one of these things are crucial that they get done tonight, that you hold off on them and you get more information before you approve them, because you don't, based on this agenda, you don't have the full information. And I think that, especially with one being a question by the audit committee, you probably should hold off on. Those people have already been paid. It's a done deal. You're not approving anything that has to be approved tonight. And I think it goes to the fact that year after year, there have been a number of issues with identifying what's going on in the athletic department, where the money's coming from, all the sources of money, and how it's being spent, whether it's vending machines or the booster club or the general fund, exactly what it is, and how much is being spent on each sport. In this budget, in the stipends you have tonight, you have $19,000, almost $20,000 for athletics, for football stipends. Yet you're taking other interscholastic sports and asking parents to contribute $100 per family, which again is a pay-for-play issue. You know, at some point in time, these issues have to be dealt with, and it says right in this policy, again, that each year, the school committee will approve the athletic funding, including, what sports are being funded, what, out of league games are going to be played, and the rest of it. So I would suggest you look at your policy, and I would suggest you look at these things and exempt them, and probably hold off until you have more information. Thank you.
Okay. On to routine items, correspondence. Yeah.
I have some correspondence. I don't know if it comes under new business or old business. I got it through the superintendent's assistant secretary from Mrs. Nutini, where a school committee member was asking that I give a report on the facilities committee that I volunteered from the school. And I think I explained to you when I volunteered that we were working to get people within the town who were experts in these areas. And by no way have I not been keeping up with the facilities committee. And I have the last report. I guess the facilities committee took their clue from us. The people did meet in August. And the other reports, but I will give you the latest one from Mr. Welch. And I would ask the assistant, the secretary or the administrative assistants to make sure that you get a copy of this, because our facility committee is made up of the best and the brightest and the most with the experience within our towns in building and so forth. And the one before the last meeting, I'd like to report to you that one of the members secured a person from the state who was the inspector of boilers, and I will get that report to you. But that was reported to you, and by no way, Mr. Roth, am I not keeping up with them. But this is the last one, and if I may I read it to you so that the committee will have it?
No, if you want, I thank you for updating us and coming forward with that information, but at the end of our agenda tonight, there is a sections for subcommittee reports, and if you'd like to give us an update at that point, I think that would be the appropriate place in the agenda to do so.
Okay, thank you very much, and I will give this to the secretary, and you'll have a copy of it, so when we do get to that, each member can follow.
Thank you, Mel.
If we have a break.
Thank you.
Copies for the committee.
Doug?
I did. I was came in tonight, and I was given some tickets for the committee and for administration for the production of 42nd Street at the high school. It's a free ticket. I'm currently giving these. These are made out specifically to us. We can distribute them if you guys want to. There's also a couple of unassigned ones, blanks, if you want to give them perhaps to somebody that needs a ticket and would want a ticket.
I donated money to this, so I already have free tickets. So now you can have one of mine.
Okay, I'll go to the senior center tomorrow.
To the seniors.
It's going to be a great production.
Donation. They
So did I. And I'll take it to the senior center.
And then another note, I think the committee got this today regarding the APRA request from the Attorney General's office. Mr. O'Neill, who had pulled the committee earlier in the year, last winter we denied his APRA request. He has appealed to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office has responded to him saying that the district needs to respond in writing for something they've requested for to complete his appeal process. He has asked that we expedite that piece of the process. I will submit that for the record. And I'll hold on this one.
Will it be coming up later at the time that mine be coming up?
What's that?
What he just turned in correspondence.
Oh, that's correspondence.
Anyone else? Kim?
I realized from our minutes that we forgot to state last time in our meeting as to that the teacher of the year was Serena Mason, so just wanted to congratulate her, and that would have been something, she's on our website, if you want to see a picture. She's a high school teacher, and we should be very proud of her.
I just wanted to suggest that perhaps we can honor her at a school committee meeting coming up soon and have a plaque for her and everything. We usually do that. Okay, thank you. Larry?
I don't want to get into a discussion over this, but just some clarification from Attorney Carroll. I'm sure if somebody's filed a complaint against the school district or the school committee, you'd be aware of it, correct?
Yes, and
And I'm sure that if we're in potential litigation with somebody, whether it be the school committee or the school district, we'll deal with it, and it probably wouldn't be advisable for individual school committee members to be dealing with people that are filing complaints against us in regards to that complaint.
I'm aware of the complaint, and I have already dealt with it with the Attorney General's office, and I sent copies of my response to both the superintendent and the chairman of the school committee. They should have gotten them within the last couple of days that they would share with the committee. Thank you.
If I can ask, James, is that relative to the correspondence I just submitted? Or is that something else, Larry, if I may ask?
I think it is with what you just submitted, because I responded to something similar.
Yeah, if
I don't know what you have, but I did respond.
just a note from the citizens asking for some finality. They sent it to everybody. I chose to submit it in correspondence.
I don't even know what you submitted.
I'm still a member, and I'll have to repeat again and again that state law does not require you to have email. And I will repeat, I did not get it. I brought a check into the office and told them to buy some stamps, and when important things like that come in, and
I just sent it to you.
I have to agree with the attorney on this one. She's right. I don't think individual school committee members should be dealing with cases that we have in litigation.
I don't think we are.
Okay, let's move on here, please.
Dictate the First Amendment again.
Anyone else have correspondence? Okay. All right. Disclosure of executive session votes?
Yes, actually, there are some from the last meeting. On the executive session that was held on 8/26/08 at 10:50 p.m., all members were present with the exception of Mrs. Brunel, and Mrs. Benson arrived at 10:55. A motion was made to approve the superintendent's recommendation in regard to the special ed grievance. The vote was unanimous to approve. A motion was made to follow the superintendent's recommendation to deny the parent complaint grievance, and the vote was unanimous to approve. A motion was made to approve the superintendent's recommendation to deny the planning time grievance. The vote was unanimous to approve. And a motion was made to seal the minutes of this executive session. The vote was 4-2 to approve, with Janice DeFrancis and Douglas Roth voting no. And a motion was made to adjourn the executive session, and the vote was unanimous to approve.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
there's one mistake. I voted no on the superintendent's recommendation. I don't know if it was that one or another one, but it had a report that the recommendation was hinged on, and I said I could not vote on anything that I hadn't seen.
I believe that was the first question. If I remember correctly, it was the first question.
Yes.
I would support Mrs. Benson. She did vote no, right?
That was
It was a different time. That was not the last executive session we were speaking on. That was a different time.
Oh, was it the earlier session?
Yes.
We were talking
That was
about
the
the
earlier
same
session.
session.
No, the executive session that we had, the
I'm not
executive...
here for that tonight, but she reported on the 10 o'clock, and that was when that was discussed.
Okay. Perhaps
There
we can
was a
get some
mistake.
clarity to that, and we can run that by again.
We had the executive session that came first. Those were reported in last meeting. And so then the second executive session was reported today because now we're in open session. So the no vote was reported initially in our open session that we had on the 26th. So that was what was recorded and that was stated in our minutes versus the later one would not be reported because you didn't vote no there. This was only from the votes from that time.
I stand to be corrected. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I also have correspondence, I believe you all have in your packet, from Mr. Kenyon, and this is the athletic bid that came into question. This is all information on the interscholastic athletic bid process, and also the request for bids, etc. So, Mr. Kenyon's here. I don't know if anyone has some questions. We can ask questions of Mr. Kenyon at this point. If there's a question regarding this correspondence. Larry?
I may have a question, but as you said, we just received this correspondence in our package tonight when we got here, so I haven't had an opportunity to review it. I will review it. If I have any questions, I will call or email Mr. Kenyon.
Okay. John?
I reserve the same privilege. I got mine Friday.
Okay.
I think if, depending on what committee members exempt from the discussion of the consent agenda, I think this is pertinent. So perhaps if it does get exempted, Mr. Kenyon will be available to discuss it during that discussion, consent, if that's possible.
Anyone else? No? Okay.
Yeah, I did have a chance to look over it this afternoon. We received it via email, and I didn't have any questions this time. Thank you for the detail that was provided to us, Mr. Kenyon.
I tried to download that, and I don't know if I have Vista. I don't know whether that causes problems in translating that back out, because I couldn't get that, so.
I didn't get it either.
I guess that's just, I better get off that program. Okay. All right, so consent agenda. Do we have any exemptions to the consent agenda? Doug?
Exempt item F5.
Okay. Anyone else? No?
I'm trying to find what alphabet it is. 6.
Number 6?
Number 9.
F9?
Number 10. And number 11.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Correction to 1A, that should be step 4 with a total salary of $49,393. That's for Tara Walsh, 1A.
Thank you.
I will go back and accept 1A.
1A?
That need to be discussed.
Okay, 1A. Anyone else? Any exemptions? Okay. Do you have a motion?
Yes, I make a motion to approve all non-exempted items on the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, F1A, now, Tara Walsh.
Just a question for Mrs. Gardner. I think we realize the amount and the conditions that we're in financially and what's to come, and I just wanted to know, are you really working to get the people that are qualified at the lower steps?
We are. The superintendent gave us a step of no higher than 5 for this school year when we've done the interviewing. So that's what we've based our interviewing. We haven't brought anybody in higher than step 5 to be interviewed. And based on the interview process, this was the candidate that was selected that best met the needs of the district.
Just a little side thing. When he said 5, I'm sure he didn't mean for every one of them to be 5. And thank you, Dr. Dalton, for that forward thinking and putting the limits on the steps. Thank you very much.
Do I have
If there's no further questions on 1A, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. F5, resignation certificated staff.
Yeah, the question I have, Dr. Thornton, are we doing any form of exit interviews or understanding why? And I know in the case of Tricia Berry why, because we had that before us. But perhaps why other teachers, if they leave the district to take a different role somewhere else, why that's the case?
It's a formal process, I would say no, but anecdotally, we do have those conversations, but there's no formal process in place right now that I know of.
Okay. Do you think at some point, whether it's executive session or not, if it's, I don't even know if it's a to-do, but it would be great to understand, especially as things get tighter. As we all know, the pressure's coming. It'd be great to understand those points as what makes a teacher choose to leave such a good district.
It's a good idea.
Thank you.
Okay.
Motion to approve F5.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. F9, approval of interim school psychologist. Mel?
After reading this and thinking about some of the salaries that the others are making, isn't this,
This is an interim.
she's an intern, but isn't it quite little for an intern?
No, that's typically the cost for the school psychologist internship is $10,000, in other districts also.
Okay, because I know the mere fact of saying "psi" means money, and don't put college with it, when we have other things in the department that's way above that doesn't require training and so forth. But if that's the rule, I'll accept that. But that's stuck out.
Okay.
Motion to approve F9.
Second.
I'll
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. F10, approval of pay increases for COSI staff. Mel?
Is this a new grant this year for the COSI staff?
New grant, no. Current, the CRP still, each year renew, but COSI's been what we've had for several years.
And the COSI did get renewed from the State Department and everything, that we can do this increase in salary,
Correct.
and we have the money in hand?
Yes.
Okay.
In hand,
Uh-huh.
as of today, the CRP, as you know, is an electronic process. The final approval has not come back yet. We get tentative approval, we push the button, it goes to RIDE. I expect final approval probably within 8 to 10 days, but it's all as we expect it would be at this point in time. It's normal operating business for the CRP at this time, and this would be within the budget.
Go back over that.
Question
It is budgeted
Uh-huh.
within our allocations for these
Okay.
grants.
It's budgeted.
Correct.
Okay. I was concerned when it said COSI that it comes, the money comes from RIDE, and we know what situation that is, but you say it was in this year's budget that we approved?
It's not in your budget, it's in the Consolidated Resource Plan, Title I, Title II, 3, 4, 5, IDEA. That historically has been submitted in paper form in June. This year, RIDE changed it. It's electronic for the first time ever. And we did our first submission back in June. We did our homework at that point. We did several iterations this summer to get it in compliance. Now, with the new system, they have a system where if something is wrong, an error pops up on the computer screen. We fix the error, go back in. All summer, we do back and forth with different people on RIDE to fix the errors, if you will. During the whole process, once all the errors are cleared, final submission happens. Final approval takes place. So that's the process. But this is a budgeted piece within the Title I and COSI, part of the CRP.
This is just a suggestion. To go on the side of caution, I would ask the committee that we do not approve these until everything come in. I don't want us to get caught with something that's been approved and it's not here, because you can't bet on Title I, not from national. You can't bet on anything from the state. They are waiting on approval. We might have to go back to a whole new budget.
Is that a motion?
That's the way I feel about that.
April?
As a COSI representative, I spoke with Donna on this, and the grant funding is coming our way. It's in. It's in. Now, it's in. It's okay. It's not something that they could pull away from us. We can't lose it.
But the question currently is with RIDE, not so much what the dollar amount is, it's making sure we spend it the appropriate way.
Appropriate way, and that we do it in accordance to their new ways of doing things. And I think what's kind of like important, and kind of like what Doug was saying about why we lose good employees or whatnot, but the salary increase will put us in line with what these people should be making, and we don't want to lose good people. So unfortunately, it costs money to keep these people here, so this increase should put us in line with what they deserve.
Just add to that, we've moved that line in 2 years now. So.
Right.
That's been 2 years.
Right. I would echo everything that April said, because I also talked to Donna today, and she did say that a number of these people hadn't received raises in 2, sometimes more years, and that by raising this, we are doing the retention to be able to keep these people. So it is all within the grant funding that we get, so it will not cost us any extra other than what is grant funded.
Are you done, Doug?
Just we had it for 2 years and I didn't get the proper amount of
That information from the superintendent, I'm going to motion to approve item F10.
I'll second it.
Second, that was my closing motion.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. F11, sports camp coaches.
I have one question about that. Have the people gotten their money? Mr. Draper?
Yes.
The checks have been issued. We got a very good report from a man, I think his name was Thomas Watson, last year. And then we got one this year about the thing. My question is, why do they send the requisition to you to cut the checks? And they have given us a report, and we have approved the camp. And then after camp is over, you get the requisition to give them money. Now, I'm not the greatest person in finance, but it seems that something can be done, Mr. Kenyon, between the one you have that's over the camp and the issuing of the checks and the time that the school committee has to approve it. Because have they cashed these checks? I'm sure they have. If I worked, I would have cashed mine. And this is a long, long delay. That's what I have to say about that. That's a bad practice.
Mr. Draper, the sports camps are all run by Aaron Thomas, am I correct?
Correct. They're run as an enterprise fund.
And so as part of the enterprise fund, they're also, everything that goes out of that fund also has been coming from sports camps, so it's totally self-sufficient in terms of, we don't pay for these people from our budget. It's all from the sports camp.
This is not a taxpayer-supported fund.
Please understand me. I understand that. Whether it's taxpayer-supported or parent-supported, this is a bad practice, and that's why we ended up having to pay money to the Department of Education with bad practices. And they know right now, he'll be in here no later than January getting approval for the sports camp. And when he gets approval, they should know what they're going to pay, and we should approve it all at the same time. I'm speaking this on the side of caution.
Okay, I have a question regarding why this is even on the if this is the enterprise account, why are we having to approve this as a school committee?
Good question.
It's just relative to the personnel appointments.
But it's not out of the school budget, it's not necessarily, it's out of this enterprise account. Is it just for information purposes, because you've already paid them? I mean, what would our approval and non-approval be?
If memory serves, I believe we had these same questions when interim superintendent Harnan was here in regards to, generally speaking, you have appointments that take place, and based on the time frame, it's still a school committee function, and correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Carroll, still a school committee function that you need to appoint people that work for the district?
Actually, you're not approving the appointment, you're approving the recommendation of the superintendent who does the appointing. So once the superintendent appoints, you approve his recommendation for appointment. But this is not...
This is sort of like...
This is something separate in a pot. You're right. This really isn't.
It really isn't.
They're employees of the camp. They're not...
Budgetary-wise, this is, as it was said, as the enterprise account. These salaries are funded through the tuition that's paid by the children that attend the camps.
Correct.
So budgetary-wise, it has no impact.
Yeah, it would not be under the taxpayer umbrella.
Right, exactly. And as far as personnel-wise, the camp's already occurred, the camp's over, and I have to say, as far as the camp goes, I really don't, and I look for correction from UNED or from Mary Ann. I really don't see the need for this even to be approved by the school committee.
That's my point. Thank you for the discussion. That's it.
To the school department.
The enterprise fund, Ned, that was a question, and just as a process question. The enterprise fund comes under the custody of the school department and the school committee, right? I mean, we execute the fund.
Yes, and it would be
Wherever the expenditures are that come out of that enterprise fund are under control of the school department.
yeah, it flows through our books much like the cafeteria. It's the same idea in terms of...
I would assume then, Mary Ann, maybe you can help here, that because the ultimate custody of that enterprise fund comes through this operation, then for transparency and for everything else that we would normally do, that's probably why you see it. I understand. I mean, it's a pass-through. It's not a taxpayer impacting issue, but we still have custody of that fund.
Right, but you don't really... You're not going to not agree with the appointments are done through it. You could basically have on here approval of the camp coaches and not list anybody's name and anybody's money.
I agree completely.
I mean, that would be sufficient.
If you don't put that on there, if you run a catch-22. You can have people coming and saying how incorrect this process is, seeing this, talking about pay-for-play, and all the other issues we continually hear. If you don't show this, you're going to have the same people coming to the microphone talking about how we don't have transparency, and you don't see the fund, and you don't see how things are being operated above board. So I agree with the attorney. I think that you could group it in one large item, but we should see it, and it should be discussed in public, because you're going to get those discussions.
My points were more when they brought in the enterprise fund, and he stated that it was under the custody of the school department. My point is, just as we make preparation, I wasn't questioning this, and I want it thoroughly understood, and I hope Karen writes what I say. Just as we make preparations and and understand when we budget for teachers and we put that and we set the salary when they come next year or this spring for the camp, would it be too much for them if they're going to have one volleyball coach to say, group them in groups and say volleyball so much? Because we are going to get ourselves in some serious trouble, and some serious trouble with lawsuits. We are responsible for it on one half, and we are not. Let a kid get out there playing volleyball and break her wrist or lose her eye or something and have to go to Boston to the hospital, and you'll see who will get the bill. I'm not for transparency and all of that.
I didn't say you were. I think it's pretty clear what you're asking is the timing of this information come to us at a different time where you can see it.
And if they're planning on having a camp next year, they already should have it in to make it.
Point of order, Jim. Don't mind. The text messaging at the table really needs to stop. It happens frequently. I've had complaints from folks in the public watching what happens when committee members
I'm
get
going to
texted.
address that in a second, but we don't know whether that is a family emergency, don't make any assumptions.
I'm not making an
here right
assumption,
now.
I'm just asking
My
if you
sense
could
is
address
that
it.
everyone should put their phone on vibrate. If you do get an emergency call from family, et cetera, you take it. April.
Exactly.
Jeepers, I remember what I was going to say. In regards to the athletics and what we're discussing, all I would ask is that for all items, I mean, we've seen this a couple of times in other areas, to have it come to us, if you want our approval on something, before you cut the check. It's we've gone in this circle 100 times, just have it come before us if you need our approval. I mean, our employees work on this because they cut the checks. So someone in payroll or in the business department is obviously cutting the checks. So some of our employees work on the summer camp and put time into it, right? Is that right, Ned?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, so we need to give approval for our employees to be involved in summer camp and cut the checks. So we just need to, get that more in sync, and I think we'll be a lot better off.
I'll make a motion that we approve 11.
Do you have a second?
Second. One quick comment, totally to the subject here. I'd just like to note, it's under 12, under Whitford Middle. I just want to point out the three,
Exempted, though, be careful.
or was it 12, wasn't it?
No, it was not.
Oh, I thought there was all one number, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, I thought it was, too.
Whoops.
Just need to be clear, are you saying in the future that we don't?
Back to
Go ahead, I think we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we can talk about
We
that.
can try to put
Yeah, we're
that
gonna talk about that
clarified at some point.
where?
No, we're going to try to take the recommendations that everybody made from a committee and sit down and make sure that you have the information ahead of time when you approve the camp in March or April. Basically, approve the camp and approve the appointment of the coaches at a certain salaries at that time.
That's not what Debbie was
That
asking.
was not what she was asking.
We're going to talk about I don't know what.
Debbie, come up to the mic. What was your question or concern?
The one thing is, you can't appoint coaches in April when you don't have the names in April.
But we don't.
Now, my question really was, from what I was understanding, that maybe this doesn't need to, but could a report at the end of the session be given that would give all of the salaries, all of these coaches? Because the problem is you don't meet in July. A lot of changes take place in July. Aaron did give me a list today of some of the reasons why things change, He said every attempt is made to have one counselor to 8 campers ratio. But he said some counselors cancel at the last minute. Somebody might get injured, a counselor, so therefore he's got to replace them. A family emergency happens and the person can't do the entire camp, so he's got to replace somebody. So there's a lot of changes that take place in the summer.
Point of order.
Maybe that's something that we should have an agenda, all right?
We need to have an agenda item or something to
That's
work on
correct. Point of order.
it. It's not.
Thank you, Jenny. It seems as though everyone's got a full run, or somebody has what we don't talk about before we can do it.
Mr. McGuinn.
Can you share the information?
We can comment on every element in consent as well tonight. Mr. McGuinn has had his opportunity to speak.
I'm going to give Mr. McGuinn an opportunity to speak on this issue.
Robert's rules say when you exempt, you put it in regular business, but just check Robert's rules.
And that's a point to Robert's rules is a guidance, not the law.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roth.
Well, you
Go ahead.
say in your policy you're going to follow Robert's rules. Either follow it or don't. Okay? You're talking a couple of issues here that are fairly important. One is enterprise accounts. Now, the cafeteria has been at a loss the past several years. So you've had to take out of the undesignated balance or the reserve at the end of the year $60, $70, $80, $100,000. And I don't remember that being voted on by the school committee, but that's an enterprise account, and that is money that the town council assumed that was going to go to instruction and not go to a deficit from an enterprise. Okay? So, you've got an enterprise. When you've established them, you have responsibilities. Mrs. Benson went on an issue that you have liability. So you don't know exactly how it's run, and if, in fact, you have liability coverage. But aside from all of that, you do have a budget number, and it says $38,077. When you add up the stipends, you're at $39. Now, have you seen the total revenue for the sports camp? And you've got a policy that says athletics is supposed to give the superintendent on the first Monday of every month a budget. Okay? Haven't seen that one either. Okay? So you don't know where you are exactly financially with it. You assume you're over. Third and final thing, the audit committee is looking at this. Okay? Because don't know any other districts in the state that set it up this way. And there's a reason. There's this law, it's called pay for play. Everybody wants to ignore it. It's been Rhode Island state law since the 1860s. And it says you can charge kids for pencils, papers, and lunch. You can't charge kids for participation. You can't use the good offices, including the good website. You can't use the person, the social worker, to see whether or not a kid can afford it and get a 30% discount, which it was on the website. There's a number of issues. Can you have sports camps in the town? Yes. Can they be run outside of the school district? Yes. Do you get into problems when you're running them like you are, and you're approving salaries after the fact? Yes.
I would ask that perhaps we may need some further, at least I would like some further clarification on all of this in regards to the enterprise, the way, I don't question the way the camp is run or that. I think if we had some more information that would make this a little bit clearer as to whether or not it needs to be in this format, be an approval, what exactly was the income, et cetera. So that's where I'm at with this right now. But
I would agree with you. I just think you just need to understand the process. There's nothing, in my opinion, inherently wrong. This is, you've got to understand, this is one interpretation of what the pay-for-play statute is. I just want to make a quick point, James, before I end this. Every district in the state has participatory clubs. Dr. Morton, you know that from your experience at Charahoe, that there are different and Ned, you probably do from Middletown as well, right? That different athletics and programs exist in different states and different votes, just like I was going to highlight the middle school soccer program, right? It was voted by the school committee to exist as a club. Parents raise money, they do certain things. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. And I just think that the disinformation that people hear should probably be countered at some point.
yes.
I can't speak on behalf of the sports games, but I do know a little bit about it because I don't run them. It's not part of, that's where the mishmash happens here, because athletics and these sports camps are not, they're separate items. First of all, I know that Aaron Thomas appoints the directors of each camp as soon as he can, who's going to head up those particular individual sports. He can't hire his counselors until he knows what his enrollment is. And when he finds out how many kids he's got that are signed up for that particular camp, then that 1-to-8 ratio has to happen, and that's why he's scrambling around to get high school kids and people, and then if the numbers are low, he has people lined up and he has to let people go. So I know that he runs into a real numbers crunch and also a timing crunch with the school committee not meeting in July, but I'm sure there's a better process to solve that. The pay-for-play issue, and I can tell you specifically where this is directed. It's directed at swimming. We added boys swimming last year. And when I met with the parents of the swimmers, both boys and girls last year, and told them that there was no budgetary money available to fund boys swimming, and if they wanted to fundraise, I would be happy to lead the fundraising charge, and we could do it together and raise the money needed for boys swimming last year. Or would you like to make a donation to the program if people would like to write a check? It's whatever your choice is. The parents chose to write checks to help support the boys swimming program last year. It wasn't a pay-for-play, and it never has been there. And we had a lot of parents that approached me after the meeting and said, we cannot financially afford to participate and can pay it for it. And we never charged them a dime. We never charged anybody a dime. It was just a donation that came from the parents to help support the program, so it's not a pay-for-play in boys swimming. There's donations that are made by the parents that choose not to sell baked goods and do car washes and that kind of thing to get the program off the ground, which we're pretty proud that we were able to do that last year. So we're mixing a lot of pieces together between pay for play, athletic budget, sports camps, and they're all separate buckets. They
Maybe
aren't
we can
together.
have some kind of clarification on that. That
Yes,
would be
that's,
helpful.
Yes.
and I have a
Thank you.
question.
Yes.
As athletic director, I think you could save us a lot of time and a lot of confusion when you get these started. And like you said, the parents were there, they were willing to help. As a director, for your protection and the school committee's protection, I would think that you would send a report gated to the superintendent, and we would have that on file. And that on file would be our legal way. I still insist that we are going to get into trouble with all of these different accounts. The budget committee was organized through the direction of the town council. And on their meeting, their agenda, they're going to be discussing sports. And we could have saved ourselves a lot of time and a lot of confusion when you do have these meetings, Mr. Kenyon. And by being the director, I hope that you don't have a poor load, do you?
From what I understand your questions.
Teaching classes and everything, don't, in your position, don't you have free periods?
I'm a full-time employee. I don't have free periods. I'm a teacher.
Oh, you're not a teacher?
I'm not.
Oh. Well, do you have a secretary?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Make yourself less trouble and just send a report, and you're the director, and ask everyone under you. Anybody understands that you can tell somebody in March they're going to have a job, and something happens in June. But send us an outline of it.
Are you talking about sports camps, or are you talking about the swimming
I'm talking
program?
about the whole thing, because you're mixing it too.
I don't have anything to do with sports camps, man. That's all I need to make that point.
We'll leave the sports camp out. Let's go back to what you have something to do with, and that was the swimming.
And if you would like the report on swimming, I'd be happy to provide it. We keep all the financial accounting through the principal's office and through Red's office as well. It's very transparent. We'd be happy to provide that.
And to the superintendent. I think you saved yourself a lot of time.
No problem. It's easy.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay, being the director, I would
Okay.
think that you would
We
want to
have a
get
motion
right.
on the table.
And it's been seconded.
Yes, go right ahead. And then we really need to move.
Kathleen Brown, 160 Prospect. I also want to remind you that as parents and Mr. Kenyon, when he came before you as a member of the athletic department, we asked for your approval to begin the boys swim club team, and said that we understood that last year there would be no money for it. So again, that did come before you before the program had started.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the table to pass F11. We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? No, I wanted further clarification, so let's say no. Okay. Okay. Are we done with the consent agenda?
Yep.
All right. We are now on unfinished business, and A, 208-209 school budget breakage. Breakage. I believe there was a request to have some type of small report in regards to where we were standing currently with breakage, with the recognition that that is a moving target, as was so eloquently described. So,
Thank you, Dr. Ritz. I had asked this be here it's a moving target in the year that you're operating in, because you don't know who's changing now, but when a previous fiscal year closes, like 08 did recently this summer, you do know who retired, who left, what the changes were in positions, and that should be a raw number at this point. And I know that previous meetings that we, for example, used the breakage to justify the hiring of the vice principal at Wickford, totally justifiable in my estimation, but we're spending that money out of a moving target, trying to identify it. I'm looking for some definition, and we're hoping to understand that number.
I can speak to One of the issues we had when we looked at last year's, and I think we spoke a little bit last meeting, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can run and get them from last meeting. But the breakage actual last year, depending on how you look at it, would be the difference between what we budgeted for personnel expenditures, which would be your labor and your benefits, versus what our actual expenditures were. I have to look up what that exact number is, but that will be included in the next financial update, because that will have your fiscal year-end summary along with the account information for each of the programs. For fiscal year 09, we budgeted roughly $450,000 as our breakage. As of this point in time, our breakage looks to be around $230,000. So that leaves us a shortfall of roughly $220,000 that we need to make up. How we'll get there, I honestly can't answer that right now until the year progresses.
So 450, the notion of budgeting breakage, I know the state does it. The state literally has a line item for that transfer of human resources when those change. Have we done that? I don't think we've done that in the past. So what I just heard was that you're saying that we budgeted breakage, we applied it to the expenditures, and that not only did we use a number, we're not projected to get as much breakage as you thought, so we have a bigger gap in our budget. Did I just hear that?
I'll answer that in two pieces. Last year, you did have what's called a contra expenditure, which is a negative expense in your expense side of the budget. That was budgeted, I believe, around $250,000, if memory serves. Now, that was done towards the end of the budget process, and that was to plug the gaps when we were finishing up the budget, I want to say late July of last year. So in essence, your bottom line had been set. After your bottom line had been set, there was a lot of scrambling to try to plug the gaps in where the original budget assumptions were and where we ended up. Now, what that ended up creating was you did have a budget line item for breakage last year. Now, at the close of this year's budget cycle, we met with Mr. Walter Edge in regards to questions about the legality of our budget presentation and also the substance of the budget presentation. One of his recommendations was to include breakage. So consistent with that, I changed, in our last meeting in June, I changed our budget line items to reflect breakage as one of the components. So that was included at $450,000. Now, a variety of things could happen. Unemployment, which was also a separately represented line, could come out more favorable for us. We could have breakage in terms of employment, the difference between the different steps and that sort of thing. And we could also have vacancies over the course of the year that we haven't realized yet. Right now, using that $450,000 mark, we believe we're about $230, $240. So that puts us about $220 that we have to make up. Now, I don't know where we'll shake out in that. Ultimately, the year end is what you budgeted for personnel and what you actually paid. If it's helpful to the committee, too, one of the things that's very difficult about giving you a straight answer on breakage is that process of bumping. Once you go through a job fair, that position itself may have had a step 10, where a step 5 teacher comes into play, but then they leave a trail behind them of other teachers that backfilled.
Yeah, it's a difficult issue because it is such a moving target, right? What has me concerned is that we're starting to spend from the item. And we're saying we're down from 450 to that 220 figure, but a couple meetings ago we budgeted 130 plus 120, whatever that number was, for the vice principal at Woodford Middle out of breakage. So we're spending from a target that we're not sure about, which is risky in my opinion, and we're also going to probably be discussing later spending on surplus funds for operational items, and that is inherently risky, and it's a concern.
Because to your first thought, in terms of the VP, that's one of those operational things where, as a superintendent, I would say we need to do that. You need to find, over the course of the year, the money to offset that. But that was one of those non-negotiables for me as far as to run a building safely. There's no choice in that one.
And two considerations with budgeting breakage. One, we want it to be in a position where we can defend ourselves if we need to make these operational decisions, legally defend ourselves. And second, when we, what's my train of thought there? When we discussed that breakage relative to the assistant principal, one of the issues was the superintendency. That is a position typically that would not be vacant for long periods of time.
That's correct.
And we're in a position this year where we will have a significant vacancy there. And with Phil's position taking on our responsibility, there's a substantial amount of breakage that is atypical for a district.
Any other questions? No?
I don't have a question, but I have a statement. I think Mr. Draper mentioned that the breakage was authorized by, did you say, Bacon and Edge or the accounting firm?
That was their recommendation.
That was their recommendation. And that is clearly, Mr. Roth, a thing in the assistant principal at Wickford, if that was the thing, that would clearly be understandable on the breakage, unless I had a difference. And of course, you can transfer money from one account to the other. But when you transfer it, I think since the new people have been in the thing, all the budgets I have, if there is not, it had from the state. If amount wasn't used and another department needed it, you could transfer that without any questions or anything. But why don't you check with Mr. Dion, who's in the State Department now, and they're working on new methods for the state. And I was glad to hear you say that, because how many times you told me you act like you're upstate. See, it comes back to reach you. I think Mr. Draper did the right thing.
Thank you, Dr. Francis. No, the notion is that we're spending operationally out of variable accounts. You don't know what the breakage number is going to be next year. No one does. All we're saying is that our accountants have said that it's time to expose the number so we can see it. The state operates that way, other districts do, some don't. The point is, though, is that we're hiring people operationally out of these variable accounts. We're going to be discussing spending surplus dollars for operational issues as well. That should be a red alert to everybody that you're starting to, you're borrowing against yourself. You're on borrowed time here. That's the point. I know we know that because we talked about it, but we need to identify it and keep thinking about operational cuts to understand that, and I agree, Phil, I couldn't agree more that you need the vice principal at Wickford. But if you didn't have breakage, what were we going to do? We do this year, you might not next year. Are we going to cut the principal next year? Those are the long-term things that we have to be thinking about. Exposing the money and understanding that sooner is why I asked the question. Thank you.
Just one thing. I don't want the superintendent, nor Mr. Draper, to feel that they've done something that is left over that wasn't completed by the former superintendent. Thank you.
Okay.
And continue to use your method.
School
It
budget.
was not completed.
School budget, school committee stipends. Larry?
If I understand correctly, Ned, you're looking for authorization for the administration to restore to the F908 budget amount of funds necessary to meet remaining stipend commitment.
In consultation with Attorney Carroll, I don't know that your approval is actually necessary, but we did want to have abundance of caution, wanted to notify you that we reversed your budget action. We also approached the town to appropriate the casino revenues towards that obligation. By doing it that way, that allows us to use revenues outside of the budget that's already approved, so we don't have to run into an appropriation issue.
Thank you. Good, smart idea, Mr. Draper.
Doug?
Very good. I'd have to compliment casino revenue. That was good. Thank you, Mary.
I guess two minor points of order. One, I think it probably should be brought up for a vote. I don't believe, even if we think that we have an issue that's something in conflict with the charter, which may very well be, I can't believe that we can just unilaterally let council override a vote of the school committee. Should probably ask to have that rescinded or revoted based on the merits of that. It sends a, I mean, if you can override that, you can override anything you want, and that's probably not a practice that we want to get into. So I'd offer that. And then second, it's happened a lot. People want certain things done. We're going straight to the attorney, overriding certain things. If we want to, we can break down the charter and show a half dozen other areas where we're probably in conflict with following the charter. The other issue is that the issue of appropriation of the casino money is not, in my opinion, is not an issue for the town to engage in. Those dollars are straight out of the statutes written under 16.4. Those are passed through to the school system, period. It's not an appropriation from the town that they need to engage in. We received correspondence. I asked for a clarification. I'm going to ask it in public. I would like the town solicitor and the school committee attorney to once and for all define under state law what the appropriation process is. Those are direct pass-throughs, and at some point, state-level guidance probably needs to be played here, because I've never heard it in any other system that the town has to appropriate state aid that's directed directly to the schools. And all I ever hear is silence on this issue. Other people come to microphones and say it. That money is school money. It's appropriated here. It comes to you. You direct it. And I'm not sure, Dr. Francis, I've shared correspondence on this subject. I think it's fair to the townspeople to understand it because it sets a bad precedent with this issue here. That's it.
Let Larry now go, because I disagree with you.
Larry.
Thank you. I'm waiting for Mr. Rott's first comments. I will agree with that, and I'll make a motion to reverse our previous vote to rescind the school committee stipends in light of the opinion from Attorney Marion Carroll.
I'll second.
Well, now I think we have an ethical dilemma, in that I abstained the last time because I didn't think that we could basically vote ourselves out of something that was by the town charter. But now, if we vote to give us back the money, I think that that's even a greater dilemma. That we'll have some problems with the motion will need to be rephrased differently, that we just can't say we're going to vote ourselves back a stipend.
Why don't you rescind the motion that you made? If you want to vote it, why don't you rescind the motion that was made? Just rescind, reconsider.
Rescind the whole motion.
Well, if you reconsider or you rescind, then there's no other vote.
It's no vote, but rescind.
Larry.
Thank you, Kim. I'll withdraw that motion and make a motion to rescind the previous vote on the school committee stipends.
I second that motion.
Those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
The roll call. Unless you heard it. I didn't hear.
And leave the motion back if you're going to do a roll call.
Motion is to rescind the previous vote of the school committee stipends.
I don't remember.
Okay.
Melboy Benson?
Yes.
April Brunel?
Yes.
Larry Ceriso?
Yes.
Renee Cockrell? Janice
Absent.
DeFrancis?
Yes.
Kimberly Page?
No.
Douglas Roth?
No.
Motion passes.
All right, policies. Kim.
Okay. Would you like to go in order, or do you want to take some of the easier ones?
Well, that would be a good idea. Let's try it if you can find an easier one.
I can. If you look at number 4, JM-R.
Okay. JM.
JM-R.
Student scholarship regulation. Recognition. Processing. Student scholarship regulation.
Correct. And we'll have on our agenda next time just the regular awarding of scholarships, not the regulation. that was just a glitch that they got in reverse order and not at the same time. But anyway, all we're merely doing in this policy is bringing it up to the proper code name under the National School Board Association. We're adding a purpose statement, and as you can see, the only thing we've changed in the stipulations is the words will be established and the scholarship.
Okay.
So, if there's...
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes, or policy passes.
I'd like to do a first read of the parent involvement policy, the KBLEA. This is a policy that has been brought to us by our COSI representative, Donna Thompson, in that when we fill out the paperwork for our Title I, one of the things that they ask us is if we have a parent involvement policy. And at first, I thought that we were sufficient in having our volunteer policy, but she explained to me, no, that we need a little bit more than that, and so that's the purpose of this one. This is a new policy. It would help to fulfill our obligation for Title I, and when we're filling out the paperwork right now, we said that when we filled out our paperwork this year, we said that this was going to be coming up, so that we didn't have it yet. So at this time, this should be something that we talk about so that then our next meeting we can have a second read and finalization.
Okay. Any questions? April?
Did this have an opportunity to go by SEAC?
It went through COSI.
It's not specifically a special education committee, it's Title I students. There may be some within that, but it's basically Title I. So it's parents within the Title I jurisdiction. And that's where that goes before. Now,
And continuing on the trend of Committeewoman Brunel, I would think that you're going to have a double cross of students, and I think it should be seen by CLAC because COSI, they have students. You're going to have one child, let's say Mel Benson is identified as a special ed student, and I'm going to be in COSI.
it's primarily Title I, has to be, the Title I parent involvement is very specific that it's Title I parents. You may be...
I have to be in two places.
Maybe.
Yes.
So, but it is Title I parents, and that is what this is, the jurisdiction is, and that's how it's written.
I would ask us to look into that before we approve that and make sure.
This is your first read.
Yeah, we're not approving this today.
I know it, but let's look into the way maybe you should meet with the attorney and they do some research. Because they're getting
It's Title I parents.
One comment if I could. This is pretty boilerplate for policies. NK was out of compliance. Our policy was not cutting it. And now we basically took from other districts and made a policy that is compliant. Part of the CRP, they ask us, where's your parent involvement policy? We now upload it and show it to them, and we have one in compliance. We can do that now. Right now, we just told them it's in draft form, we're working on it, and that was acceptable. But we were out of compliance with our old policy.
Had she said that in the beginning, I wouldn't have to waste your time because I knew somewhere dealing in Title I that we had been out of compliance. Thank you.
So, on the first read, do you need a vote?
Just the first read, if there's any changes, if there's any comments, that sort of thing, I'd like those to be brought up now, and this is perfectly fine, this discussion. And then if there's nothing more, then what we just say, okay, then for our next meeting, we'll move this on to our second read, unless we need to make some changes. Okay.
I'd just like to see if the getting of the policy in compliance. But you don't know who's going to be here, and then we'll know we're in compliance.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Next.
Okay, well, if there is no further discussion on that, yes, I'll move on. This is a first read of the IJOB policy. IJOB is our Community Resources Person Speakers. This policy has had many iterations and has actually been one that we've been working on for close to a year, I believe. It is basically setting forth that when we have outside speakers come, that we want to make sure that we give parents notice a week before the outside speakers come. The purpose of that is not to discourage people from the speakers, but it's more to foster a conversation so that parents can know who is coming, and perhaps after the speaker has come, that they can discuss that with their child, to say, oh, I heard you had such-and-so as a speaker, how did that event go? That was the main purpose of this. It's also to also make sure that outside speakers would be able to realize that they are to be in compliance with all of our policies. And it puts some responsibility on the building administrators who bring them in to make sure that the speaker knows our policy and is also going to be keeping in compliance of speaking on the topic that they say that they're speaking.
This is very good, but you didn't mention in here who recommend the speakers and who's going to be responsible for them, because this is good. We had a situation last year where we had a speaker at the school, was it last year or year before that?
It's number 4.
The building administrator, teacher sponsoring the speaker, shall have the authority to limit or suspend discussion. Limit or suspend the discussion. My point getting to is that if Mel Benson is putting in for a speaker to come to her 8th grade class and talk about George Washington, that I as a teacher would have to send to you, Mrs. Page, as the person who approved it, a little biography or something, because you never know what a person going to say until he gets there. And if he's an author of certain books, and the relevance to the curriculum, the speaker must have something relevance to the curriculum or the grade level.
Well, that isn't the first part. I mean, part of it is we figured that the teacher for their classroom or if a principal, they would only bring somebody in who is relevant to their classroom. A large part of this is that we don't expect them to bring somebody in that has no relevance. We say in the first part that basically the message about the speaker's topic that should be made available so that people will know what they're coming in to speak about. We purposely did not put in here that we would have a verbatim speech of what the person would say, because we said very few people really write that out, and we felt that would stifle any sort of communication, especially if you wanted to have a question and answer period with students, that we didn't want to do that. And that was something when we first vetted this policy to the teachers, that they specifically said to us that that was unworkable. And so we really said we don't want to have anything that is verbatim, just a general sort of outline of what is this person going to come and speak about so that people know the topic and they can go to either the principal and or the teacher and say, what's the topic of conversation here? What is this person's background? How is it relevant to the classroom? And those sort of things, so that would be open to people, but yet at the same time we wouldn't stifle that inquisitiveness that we want to foster within the classrooms to make sure that it is relevant and that students are learning from having that ability to have somebody come in and give that knowledge that they have from working with things firsthand.
You know, that has always been the practice. And any good teacher, I don't know if we've had a rule before, but any good teacher is always searching to bring something in that will go in with her curriculum, that will help the children to better understand it. But I think you are missing my point. If I was going to have, I'd say, Gary Sass in finance to come in and speak to my class, I would think I would have to write something for the teacher, for the principal, and tell her why I chosen that. He's an author of a book, he's a great financier, he's a master with budget making, and we're studying the way to raise. Not that we're stifling a teacher, Because some of the best learning experiences is when people come to speak in a class.
That's number 3.
And I'm looking at it, I didn't get it, so I'm not that dumb.
No, I'm not saying that, but the intention, I believe, what you're saying, though, is behind number 3.
Building
So perhaps we need to embellish it a little bit more to...
Yes,
Okay.
it needs to be embellished, and then there needs to be something in here that after it, that some results in what he's talking about, this will enhance, you know, your things, a new way we're going into the curriculum and everything, and the outcomes, that some outcomes be given.
Well, if you look at number 1, would you, because we agree with you.
I'm through with it.
Okay.
I just want to see the kids. I just wouldn't care if your child to Boston Museum and not have him come back, write, speak, or dramatize something concerning that trip to show his learning, but I'm through with it. You have an excellent thing. You leave some imagination for the teacher.
Is there any other comments or suggestions on this policy? Right?
Kathleen Brown. The only question I would have is under number 2B, where it says must have prior administrative approval. Is that from the building administrator or like at the district level? That would really be my only question.
Building. That'd be the building.
Building, or the teacher, is it kind of in line with building administrator or teacher? Or,
You don't want to have to do that, do you, Dr. Thornton?
Building's great.
okay.
I think it should be the building administrator. Good point.
That may be an area where we want to add the building, word building in there.
Yeah.
Word building.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I guess we'll go to BDE, support committees to the school committee. This does not need 2 reads. This is, unless you don't like it. This policy is currently on our books, and we have the highlighted portions in here that we're suggesting to add. To give you a little background on this policy, we had some questions last year as to why what were the procedures that some of our subcommittees, our support committees, that's actually what we technically call them, as to what rules they should follow, who should be voting, who can't vote, when is there a quorum. And so we realized we didn't have that addressed anyplace in our policies. So it so happened the town adopted a policy at the same time talking about their support committees. So I asked John Patterson if he could email me over a copy of their ordinance that they had adopted to show what they had done for their members who sat on support committees and what they said for support committees. And pretty much then we kind of said, oh, that sounds pretty good. What they're doing, we should do too. And so that's where a lot of these suggestions came out of. Now, I'll go down on the first page, question 1A, part 1A, we do no longer have a personnel committee, so we actually changed it to the budget subcommittee. On the second page, under 3, this came up a couple of meetings ago in that when we realized we have no way of when somebody steps off of a committee and we go to put a third person on the committee, we realized it's fine if only one person of our 7 says, oh, I want to be on it. But when we start having 2 people who want to be on it, then there's a conflict. And we tried to figure out what would be a logical way to have this on. And we had heard from people that they didn't like the voting method that we had taken in our first meeting when we had 5 people sign up for the negotiations committee and we only had 3 spots. So what we decided to do is instead of a vote, we decided to do it by lot. Where basically you could either, we didn't designate how you wanted to do it. If you wanted to do straws or you wanted to pull names out of a hat, but our suggestion was that you do it by random. If the committee does not wish to go that way, that is fine. That was the suggestion of our subcommittee. Moving on, 7, A through H is what we pretty much kind of said what we liked that came out of the town committee for their procedures in working with support committees and giving our support committees some guidance as to what they should do. Some of this is by law as to how they have to follow the open meetings law and making sure that they report their minutes and having their agendas posted ahead of time. And other parts of it are what we felt were good practices, and again, was following along with the town in that the school committee liaisons would report on a periodic basis. They wouldn't be voting members. They would be there for the purposes of giving an input. So that's why this came about. So I'm ready for comments, suggestions.
This is a first read.
Yes, it is no. This is a policy area in our books. So if you don't like it, you can give us those suggestions, toss it back to the subcommittee, and we can work on it some more. We don't have to vote on it if people say, oh, this is not the direction we want to go. But it doesn't need 2 reads. It's merely we make changes. I would not suggest that we make changes here in committee and then we vote on it today. If we have extensive changes to be made, I would say, give me the direction you want us to go. We can kind of vote on some of those directions, and then we can bring it back with the changes in Compass to make sure the language and everything, because I know this is going to be controversial. I know there's going to be a lot of suggestions, but we don't technically need 2 reads to amend a policy we already have.
Okay. Any comments? April?
Question, just basically, so how much of this is from, or I would really like to have seen what the town had accompany this, so I could do a comparison, but how much of this is from the town? Do you recall offhand any of it?
It's pretty much verbatim. I changed town committee to school committee. If you'd like, next time I can make sure that I can provide you with the compare and contrast, but...
So it means like number 7 is all from the town?
Pretty much so, yeah.
Okay. Just to go a little into it, the only concerns I have is, I don't know if it's the times we're going through or what parents are going through, or even if the committee is aware, we've been having a really hard time finding volunteers to work and stick and stay on committees. Maybe the town doesn't have as many committees as we do, but like in reconfiguration committee, if you had said to our reconfiguration committee, if you miss 3 meetings, you can't attend any longer, because there were a lot of people who just, with huge time constraints, were just volunteering basically what time they could. And it ended up being that, we had very low participation in a lot of meetings. So I just have some real concerns right now. I don't know if it's the period of time we're going through, or if there's maybe some more allowances we can have in there. We don't want to squelch volunteerism, and we're not getting a lot of it.
Well, part of that is the reason that we do have a May in there, and that we realize that. And so one of the things we said is that if they missed 3 and they have an unexcused absence, remember that's an unexcused, so that means they didn't tell you anything. If they said, my child is sick or something like that, then that's an excused absence. And then it says he or she may be considered to have lost interest. And we don't say kick them off. We say, okay, chairperson of that committee, why don't you discuss the problems with the respective member? And obviously, if they've lost interest, that's when we say, well, then ask the school committee to replace them. So you're right. We don't want to squelch volunteerism, so that's why we put a lot of mays. We give it that, that there's some opportunity. But it also then, it lets you come to the point where you have some time where somebody isn't showing up, you don't really know if they run, and you have that kind of that sticky situation of, okay, so-and-so wants to be on, and we filled up. This gives you the opportunity for somebody to gracefully kind of say, I just can't do this anymore. I don't have enough time. And so then you can say, all right, well, it's our recommendation to the school committee that so-and-so be bowed out, and we have so-and-so come on.
And then another comment I have is on B, 2B, and that's in regards to the committee liaisons. A lot of times, and I know, Ken, maybe you haven't served on any of these committees. I've served on growth management, start time committee, reconfiguration. A lot of times, you break up into sects and you work and you have like flow of communication and talking, and I really feel uncomfortable with, it sounds almost stifling when you say that a school committee member can't talk to the public unless requested to do so by the chair. And I really haven't ever seen us totally out of control at a meeting where any of this is going on. I mean, we really try to harvest free-flowing conversation and more. It's not, a lot of them aren't like hardcore meetings like we have. A lot of times it's dialogue and I don't know, I'm kind of iffy on that. Some of the, I don't know, maybe because on the town side they're dealing with different issues. Maybe they aren't talking about full-day kindergarten and they got parents sitting around. Maybe on the town side it's more like asset management and different issues that don't involve children. When you talk about children and parents, and we're not talking always high finances, it's just it's a different flow, and I just have some concerns that as it is, it was getting harder and harder to find people to serve on committees. When we went for growth management, and I was temporary chairing, we went 3 meetings with no chair, because nobody wanted to be chair, because nobody knew how to follow Robert's rules. Nobody had the time to put into it, and God bless Jill for coming forward. And then halfway through, she said, I can't do this, and then Terry O stepped through. But we went meetings without chairs, because people do not have the time or the experience or feel comfortable following this. I just have some concerns, if we have to do it, we have to. I think it's a little bit too tight.
Well, I have served on various committees, so I know what that can be like. This is taken straight from the town. And if we don't want this in our policy, that's fine. Like I said, I merely took it because the town had done it, and that was how they laid out their liaison members, and so I suggested that we do the same. But like I said, if the committee chooses not to do that, this is our policy, we can change it. So, that would be one thing that I'd say, if I'd almost want to not take a vote, but at the same time, I'd like to hear from everyone as to what people think about B, or do you want to, and so here's 2 parts. What do you think about B? If you don't have any thoughts on it, you'd like to wait until I can bring you the town policy, we can wait until then.
My sense in this, I think that when you're looking at the April, and the statement about school committee liaison will not respond to questions from the public unless requested to do so by the chair. I think maybe that does need some clarification if we're going to look at school committee members going out and being part of committees. We'll have the opportunity to respond, answer, participate. My sense is that as you're going as a school committee member, you're representing the committee, or if there are occasions where you're just representing your sole opinion, then that's stated as such. So maybe there has to be some of that clarification within that. Doug, and then Mel. Hold on,
okay.
Mel. Doug.
I would agree. I mean, having sat on some of these committees, the discussions are all less formal. As long as a stipulation is there so that the meetings have a record, votes are recorded, minutes are kept, there's general order, you're okay. I think it's a little restrictive to say committee members won't speak unless spoken to. And to me, I think, you're not sitting in a quorum, so your opinion's not effective or doing something different, and your relationship to the subcommittee has been decided upon at this level, right? We've all agreed that we're going to be there. So I think restricting committee members' participation in any way is problematic. I don't think that's necessary. And maybe that is just due to the inherent differences that town meetings and town topics are probably a little bit more rigid and structured than more of the free-flowing and I won't say emotional, but school issues tend to hit a little bit more home, so.
I mean, like in wellness, sometimes the cafeteria person brings food samples to us, and we sit around and we eat, and say, oh, geez, no. I mean, that was what our last meeting was. We invited students.
April, what did you think of the apple? Don't answer until you're spoken to.
The food was really good.
Any other thoughts on this?
It
sounds like people don't want this to be as restrictive. I mean, that's easy to take out.
Go. May I speak? I have a problem with it being restricted. And of course, certain committees deserve certain interactions and things. But what I would like to see before we approve this is, we're not going to approve it today, is let's have an update of all standing committees of the school committee. And then we'll know, and then you have on here permanent committees and subcommittees and so forth. But what is a permanent committee of the school committee? Don't look at it in the whole totality, but what would be classified as a permanent committee? A lot of times I've always said in different other organizations, you have a permanent board, which is a school board elected, and you really don't need permanent committees, because to me, committees is a good way for people that are responsible for things to say, well, the committee agreed with this. Let's keep this and go over it again, and all of us bring our thoughts back to you, and we'll discuss, put this on for another meeting and another discussion. And we'll go over this.
Brief on this.
Just a couple of quick comments. I think that, what the committees are, I would say that, when you look at some of these things, especially permanent committees, budget and policy, one of the things is this doesn't account for experience. If the school committee doesn't have experience, and Mrs. Cockrell's been very forthright, I thought she did an excellent job last year with the budget committee, but she admitted she didn't have experience on it. And the town council, when they appoint committees, the audit committee is 4 CPAs and an attorney. There's other committees that, planning, a certified engineer. So that really what you're asking for, especially on budget, is you're asking, I think, to go out offline, get these things resolved, so when it comes to this committee, there's a report, it's very clear, the chairman can give a 2-minute overview, and you're confident on what you're voting on. The other thing is that as far as safety, I would highly recommend that safety be a standing committee, because safety doesn't go away. Safety is an issue that is dynamic. It changes on the threat changes on a regular basis. And finally, I think that if you're going to have standing committees, they have to meet so many times a year and at certain times. Right now, the past couple of months, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, I haven't seen many meetings for the budget committee meeting. We had already met a number of times by this time last year. So that, the budget committee meeting should be looking at, issues, and, I know Ned's working issues and he's doing a good job, but, the budget committee meeting committee should be working and having them, these committees that the town council establishes have set number of meetings that they have to have each year as a minimum, on a quarterly basis or whatever. And my last thing is, the safety committee is meeting on the 24th. It's not on the schedule to do a walkthrough of Wickford Middle and the safety, the cameras that have been installed, just to do a follow-up on that. I would take another look at this and bring it back, because this is an important policy. Thank you.
Kathleen around a couple little things, too, after having just been on a committee as well. I guess the first question I have is in number 7, that first little paragraph or that first sentence there, should that almost be like an A as well? It just kind of looks like it's floating, so that's more of just a format question. But the one that is listed as A, it says a member or non-member as a secretary. So that threw me a little bit. If someone starts participating in the meetings as a secretary, what's to say they don't really become a member, or should they really just become a member as well so that they can participate as well? So I just wasn't sure how, can anyone say, oh, well, my brother, he'll be the secretary, and bring them along. Next question I had was, there are a couple things that you guys mentioned in conversation, but I don't see them in here, and maybe I'm just overlooking them. And that is, you talked about recording votes, and I assume that would be the responsibility of the secretary, and I don't see that specifically stated. And the other thing you mentioned was quorums. We actually struggled with that many times with our configuration meetings. Did we have an actual quorum? And I don't see that specifically listed here either. Thank you.
I will address that, in that we did not get that specific because we thought that those would be under Robert's Rules of Order.
And that's where it kind of comes up, where I say, if you have to follow Robert's rules and you have all these volunteers on these committees, there were several meetings where no vote could be taken just because it was such a large number committee, and we had you had to have so many, and so many meetings went by where they couldn't make a decision, on that. I guess my question would be to Mary and Carol, do you have to follow Robert's rules?
No.
I wouldn't recommend that it would be part of our policy, just because it just delays work. When we had to have this report done by a certain time, and people weren't showing up, you couldn't get it done because of 1 or 2 people didn't show up. But we had, what was it like, Kathy, 19 people there? Or what was it? It was like...
Right, like you're struggling with having a...
But there was a lot of people there willing to work, and you couldn't work because you didn't have... And I just think if it's by law, you might say something like, strive to recognize Robert rules, or something like that, but not that you have to follow Robert's rules.
And it should give the subcommittees leeway to determine their own operating structure, right? So, Andy sat in a couple of those meetings, right? Operating by consensus is, in my opinion, perfectly acceptable. As long as everybody understands you're working under consensus, right? And so I would look to the leadership of the subcommittee, if they appoint one or however it works, to articulate how they're going to operate even at a given meeting. They just need that flexibility. It's just normal. If you start demanding that they follow the same structure that we do here, you'll never, ever get anything done. And that's not a qualitative statement, that's just the reality of it.
No.
My point was, and what I'd like to say, and restructure this, and this is to all of the committees, members of the board, let's think about this. I think, and if you are honest with yourself, the Reconfiguration Committee was one of the hardest working and diligent committees that we have had. Now, I'm going to go and work on a committee, do unto others as ye would them do unto you, and work on the committee, and we work as hard, bring plans back to the committee, have them voted on, we accept them, and then 10 weeks later somebody come up, we don't know what happened. We don't have enough information. Let's set some rules in there for us. Think about it, Ms. Page, because you'll be working on this. Let's set some rules for us so that when, maybe you should state that when a subcommittee brings a report to the school committee, if there is anyone who doesn't understand it, there will be a recourse for them to go to the committee meeting, meet with the superintendent or someone to bring them up. Because I don't know how you're going to get nobody to volunteer the way we treated the reconfiguration committee. It's going to be very hard. And like I said, too many committees, it takes your responsibility, and then you can always say, I'm not responsible. It came out of committee. That's one thing you learned from upstate, Mr. Raw. That's why we're like that now. You mentioned it. They hired because it came out of committee.
I've never been upstate, Mrs. Benson. You
left there last week.
I was not.
Okay, April? One quick question. Do you have to advertise all meetings? Are we looking to pay for that?
It's not that you have to advertise them, you have to send it off to the Secretary of State's website.
Okay. I just wanted to check on that, yeah.
Let's make that explicit, too.
Yeah, okay. Just so you're sending it to the website?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Right, it's not an advertisement in the paper for subcommittees, it's merely that
That's not required.
you just put it on the Secretary of State's website.
Okay, good.
Oh, and post it, go ahead, Karen. Go ahead,
It also has to be posted in two locations that are prominent, like where it's being held in the building. We send it to the library and the town hall also.
Okay. Next one, Kim.
All right. Well, thank you for your comments and your suggestions. We'll bring that back to the committee for the next meeting, so that will stay on the agenda. And next time, I'll make sure for everyone's packets that there's a copy of the town, and also I'll make some of the changes that have been suggested here today. Thank you for your input. The next one we should take a look at is the vending machine policy. Now, that's EFE.
Hold on a minute.
I could just make one quick comment before we get into this agenda item. At our May 13th meeting, we voted unanimously to turn over the vending policy issue to the Town Audit Committee. And I believe it's on the next agenda. I certainly don't have an issue with having a discussion around this or any information you want to pass along or update the committee on, but this is a discussion that we've already had and an action that we've already voted on.
That's true, and in our letter that we sent to the Audit Committee, we asked them for them to determine three things: policy suggestion, a review and finding of the contracts in place, and a review and finding of the deposits and how they're accounted for. But we didn't take any sort of action or discuss the vending machine policy. We just kind of put it in. Since it's a new policy, it does require 2 reads. So we can read it here, talk about the things that we like, we don't like, wait for some of the discussion from the other committee before we have a second read. Or you can, on the second read, you could approve it and then make amendments according to what the Audit Committee then comes back with us to. But we've never had the first discussion of what we like, we don't like about it. So that's where I guess I'd like this committee to at least talk about what we like, we don't like about it, since we haven't done the first read and we've had it on our agenda since before May 15th.
No?
Maybe we're on different tracks, Committeewoman Page. But the reason that the Audit Committee is discussing it, and the reason it's on the agenda, is because we had discussed it, and they saw need for it. Now, for us tonight to forerun the Audit Committee, let's save this one until the recommendations come back from the Audit Committee, because we have discussed the vending machines. And I think since the Audit Committee was ordered through Almonte up there in Providence, and he suggested that we have an Audit Committee. It was designed and given to the school committee. Let's wait and get their things. We're kind of drifting away from what we were told to do and trying to do something. So let's hold this one until after the Audit Committee and they make their recommendation. Then we discuss it and send back to them the things that we think that we can use. But to discuss it tonight before we send it to before the audit committee has its say, that's why we have it. You all continually want to forget that we were some bad boys down here and girls. Why we have these things. So I would suggest that we wait on the audit committee.
Mr. Ron? Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Tell you what, let's make it simple. If there's a motion to table the issue until we hear from the audit committee, maybe we'll entertain that. So I'd offer that as a motion at this point.
I second that. It's sensible.
All in favor?
Well, I'd like to have a discussion on it first.
Go ahead, discussion.
Well, I agree that we have talked verbatim about the vending machines, but we've never talked about the policy. And so that's what I'd like to have the discussion on, if this is the policy that we want to have going in this direction. So, yes, we've talked about the vending machines, but we've never said, and this is the way we want to go about making sure that we have our vending machines accounted for. And so, if anything, we say we want to have our vending machines accounted for, but we don't have any policy there. This policy was written back in April, and we still haven't even talked about it.
Excuse me.
08.
Okay.
And we still haven't even had any discussion as to how we want to go about auditing them. So that's why I'm saying, tonight, we don't have to make any decisions, but I want to know if this is the way we want to go about auditing our vending machines.
We clearly stated that we wanted to postpone it until it came from the audit committee, which was designed and given to us by Almonte, who is the Auditor General of the state. And I know well, and you know well, Kim, any policy can be broken.
But we don't have any policy in place.
Let's wait and get one through them. That's why they had it at their meeting.
I appreciate, Kim, what you're doing, and to some extent, I understand, you want to get something moving and everything. The only part and concern I have is that we've asked a volunteer group to do the work and then come to us and then have a discussion. And I don't want to diss them or slap them in the face by going ahead and working on this when they already have something put together. I just really recommend just hold off. Their meeting is coming up real short. It's going to be in a blink of an eye. Bring everything in front of us, have it all laid out, because we could talk about this for the next hour, and then it would be all wrong, and then we're talking about it again. And I just do not waste the next hour on that, and just hold off.
Yeah, we're asking for their input. We've gone this far without one. Their policies are manual that have existed for 10, 15, 20 years. Let's get their input. I do differ with the notion that they're directing it, they own the policy. They don't. We're the elected body. They're an advisory group. But I think it's perfectly understandable to get that advice before we even have the first read. I've read the policy. I think it's fine as a first read. I have no problem with the content, but it's not going to hurt anything to wait. Let's do that.
Larry?
And they're not going to jump out of the school before we get the report from the other. We've been struggling along for years, so let's just wait.
As Mr. Roth said, they are an advisory committee. They can advise us. Right now we're having a discussion that we voted to table and to send it. We voted to table this discussion and send it to the audit committee back in May. If you read the minutes from that meeting, right. And now we're into a half-hour discussion over it again. So
then that would have been appreciative to have told me before it got put on the agenda. Because we've had it on the agenda for 4 months, and nobody said to me, well, that should be on the agenda because it has been tabled by this motion. I mean, it's a sort of thing of, I thought we could still talk about if this is the way to go, because basically we sent them a proposed policy, and from the policy perspective, committee perspective, we didn't even know if people liked it. I mean, Mr. Roth's comment is the first time that anybody at this table has said in the open meeting, I like it or I don't like it. It was the direction to go. It wasn't the direction to go. So that was where my concern is. We're sending this off to the policy committee. We're sending it off to the audit committee, and we're not even knowing if this is the direction the committee wants to go. So it would have been helpful to say, yes, it's the direction, or no, it's not, before we even send it to the audit committee.
Well, obviously, I sent it to the audit committee because I thought we need help on it. It needs a lot more, it needed a lot more detail, and I did say that at that meeting at that time, and that, it was a very touchy, sensitive situation, and that we needed help from an audit committee. So I'm sorry if you didn't get my message, but I think it's a little too vague, and I had said at that time it needed more detail.
Currently, everyone has the proposed policy that is also going to the committee, the advisory committee. And that subsequently, they'll be meeting very shortly on this, so we should be getting that returned back. So then we would be having this on our committee agenda, again, would be the first read.
Right, it would be the first read.
Okay.
Then if the motion goes through.
So right now, there's a motion on the table, I believe, to table it. And we have a second?
Second.
And that's the table until we get information from the advisory and then bring it back to our committee. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Is there any...
You have on here the naming policy, but I don't have that in my packet.
A motion to table naming policy?
Larry,
I had
do I
actually,
have a second?
I'll second that, but I do have discussion.
Go ahead.
I had actually requested this to be on the agenda. My concern was there was some correspondence going back a month ago that I think created the perception that there was a policy draft and ready to go, and for some reason it wasn't making it to the school committee meeting agenda. So it's on the agenda. I didn't know if that was to open the agenda to give anyone an opportunity to comment or ask any questions or bring forward any concerns that they had. I, for one, am not quite sure I see the need for a school committee policy. I think we've already had a legal opinion from our attorney, basically in a nutshell stating that we don't have any jurisdiction over the naming.
Correct.
So I'm not quite sure I understand the necessity of the policy, but in the spirit of keeping the agenda open and making sure people have an opportunity to question, comment, or concern, I did ask for it to be on there just to clear up any miscommunication there may have been.
I would say we do need a naming policy in that we have different libraries that we name, we have auditoriums that we name, and so we ought to have some means or process that we go through to name those. And if the committee wants to say, okay, take that off as to the school building, that would be fine. But for all the other things, we should have some sort of a policy as to how we go about naming them.
You're looking more specifically at naming policy, not so much a building itself, but maybe whether it be playgrounds, libraries, auditoriums, gymnasiums.
Exactly, yes. All those things need to be, they are named, and so we should have a policy that we go by to say this is how we do it.
Okay, I understand, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question to ask
Just a
about
minute, Mel, let's get the floor.
that. Okay, go on, Mr. White.
I would agree with Kim down the line on that. So you need a policy for such issues, and I think the episode we just went through said that we really do need a process that prescribes what we're going to do moving forward. So totally supportive of it having moved to the agenda, and if it's there, love to see it, love to talk about it.
So, Kim, just so with clarification, when you have a draft ready, I'll let Karen or Janice know so we can...
We do have a draft ready. Again, it was one of those things we had back in April, so I'll be more than happy if the committee wants to review it. It will again need 2 reads because it would be a first-time policy.
Mel, I'm sorry.
That's okay, go ahead, Mel.
I hope we don't policy ourselves to death. And I hope we got the opinion on naming big buildings and things. It looks like to me, and this is just my opinion, and you can correct me, interview, and the audience too, that we are heading for, maybe we need to get busy and work on the state constitution and get some of the state laws read, because everything that's a state law policy or something. I was in a school today that was remodeled about 20 years ago. And every member of the school committee that was on the committee who did that was on this plaque. And it should have been there. And the year that they remodeled. Let's don't policy ourselves to death and move and don't be community-wise. It was good to see George Gallagher's name there. He was on the school committee some 20 or 30 years ago. Everything got to have a policy. Some policies are good, but we're still a body that operate under the town charter and at the whims of the voters. And we're putting too many restrictions on things. And that's why we have all these discussions. We forget what our mission is.
April, I would recommend then, I know you've already got something together, or, consider, I'll certainly mention that possibly saying that, if this town was to rename a school or something, that it would have in the policy that the town council and the charter reads, and exactly what we did. I mean, it could be a part of that policy that we don't name the buildings.
May I make a motion?
Just a minute. Well, just as a reminder, we don't need to put into our policies things that are already state law, that if it is a state law, you don't need to reiterate that, or our policy manual will get even bigger. But
I'm sorry, I thought in your policies you've written before, according to law, like in wellness, we did.
Right.
We actually said, and according to the new law, the wellness policy will read. So, we have done that before, Kim.
We can make reference to it, but we don't need to spell it out either. Our policy will deal only with the namings of things within the buildings, so that we don't need to have a policy on naming a building. But it was just so controversial.
And everybody was like, I don't know how to do it. How do we do it? How do we do it? And it was so controversial, and there was so much fighting over it. It was kind of like ridiculous. And now we got it spelled out for us. Why not spell it out? This is how you do it. Instead of 20 years from now that you go through it again.
If you'd like to have it spelled out, we can put that in there.
Just a recommendation.
Now, to get a good point, remember, as a school committee, that is our main function, is to be working on policies. And it is one of the things that the Bacon and Edge report talked about when they evaluated us, that we needed to get our policies in order. And so that's part of the reason that this committee has working. We meet twice a month, we go over policies, we look at our timing of them to make sure that when the students start out, that we have things like the attendance and those things updated before students come in, so that we can start the year off. So it's one of those things that I don't want to minimize what we do here, but this is a big chunk of what we as a school committee are supposed to be doing. And so it should be the area that we spend a lot of time on each meeting, is working and updating our policies to make sure that things run smoothly. And we try to get rid of outdated ones and old ones when we look at our policy book, which I have read at least twice. I admit it, from front to back. It is not light reading, but it is the sort of thing of that's what our responsibility is as school committee members.
There's an inherent difference between determining which body has the right under law to name and determining a process by which we think represents the community in the process of naming. I think we don't have to rehash the past, but there was a difference of opinion on both ends of that. I don't agree with Mrs. Benson. Some policies need to be in place, and just doing this stuff arbitrarily is what caused the ruckus in the first place. And believe me, I lived it painfully sitting in what's now Dr. DeFrancis' chair. So doing it arbitrarily is what caused the problem, not necessarily the push to rename. So I think that we do need a policy, and it needs to be discussed, and we need to think about how we bring the community together on these things. Doing it arbitrarily is absolutely the wrong thing to do, and I disagree with you completely on it.
Well, I would like for you to agree with me. It would mean very much, so I will explain it to you. I said certain things, and I will give you a concrete example. if I used the Hoskins Park School. That's what it was before it was Fishing Cove. I'm sorry. Maybe I've been around, and I know, not that I know, but I know some of the things that happened, but I very much, because I certainly don't want to see what happened with the last naming of the school. I meant arbitrarily, if I'm teaching in a classroom and we have someone, a volunteer, that's very important to us, and she comes in and she gives a full measure of devotion, and it's one of these open rooms, and she does a specific thing up in this corner with those kids. I think that you could arbitrarily name that part Nuccini, and the kids will remember what going there. All of this is designed, and the school committee is to work and get it for the children. And, we jump too quick. So that was mine, and yes, we need a policy, because in renaming Quinnesset, I'll be the first one to tell you. And there's nothing wrong, Miss Page, with putting in another few lines, because it's that big now, so you can identify why we are doing this thing. Because who knows, I see a man running for school committee, he'll be sitting here next year. And if he hadn't been here tonight, and he gets that big catalog, and you have in there where he can go and look at it, it'll save him time. We're still working for the public and people to understand things.
Thank you, Mel.
Okay. So that's it for policy?
That is it, thank you.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to table. I don't know if you want to, Larry seconded it.
Table which one?
To table the discussion we just had.
Oh.
So,
until after the...
So I would withdraw the motion if we're going to move on.
I think we're moving on. Okay. K through 5 with configuration update.
Sure. Currently, I have had some meetings already in the works with the terms of transportation. Also, some members of the subcommittee that had a report from last year. It will keep meeting. The crux of my job right now is to measure the capacity of the buildings and confirm the report from subcommittee, and then we have that conversation about margin of error, whether or not I could comfortably recommend to you whether or not we can go to 5 or 6 schools. Although I don't have any hard numbers yet in terms of capacity for 5, but I'm getting closer. The trick of it is to talk about capacity as defined by the architect versus capacity defined by what's practical in the building. And sometimes what the architect drew up isn't what exists in the building today. And then in buildings like Stony Lane or Stony Lane and Quinnesset, the walls move. So they move from week to week. You count ceiling tiles to find out the room sizes. So we're going to talk about what's realistic capacity, and my thing to you was talking about if we were to go to 5 schools, I need a very large margin of error, so we're not going to be packing them in 5 schools. So I'll have more on that as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, new business, 2008-2009 COPS program.
I thought we had covered that at our last meeting. I'm not sure why we carried it. I don't know. Was there anything you wanted it back on?
Moved it to December discussion after audit, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It was my understanding the school committee direction was to wait till after the audit, and we...
That was mine.
Oh, okay. Karen just clarified. Last time we talked about 07, 08. This is 08, 09.
Kim?
And wait for the...
I just got my newspaper today. I still get the newspaper from where we lived formerly in Washington for business reasons. Anyway, on the front page of the newspaper from the island was a piece on they don't have enough money this year to have the cops at the high school. And I realize this is not just a North Kingstown, Rhode Island issue, but this is something that is nationwide. So it made me think that this may be something that we want to start talking to, because Washington had first gotten the cops in there through a federal funding. And so, we should start making, not this committee, because it's not on our agenda, but it may be one of those things of, we may want to start thinking about, do we want to lobby our U.S. congressmen to say, we need this funding back, because it's not just North Kingstown that is having this issue, it's a lot of schools. We don't want to come to the point where we're looking at more Columbines and that sort of thing because we don't have the police in there. So this is beyond us, it's beyond our town budget, and frankly, for Rhode Island, it's beyond our state budget. So that's why, in speaking for other schools, we may want to look at this as a bigger issue. Like I said, it's not on our agendas today, but it may be something that we want to think about. Do we want to take this as a school committees and start saying to our U.S. House and senators to say, could you take up this issue?
I'm in no contest with you.
Kim, I like the idea so much I'd make a motion that the school committee ask the chair to write the Rhode Island congressional delegation.
Well, I think all we could do is put it on our agenda at this point.
Really?
I don't know.
Possible action.
I mean, it's...
You might be able to.
You can do that.
Well, let's ask Mary Ann.
You can take an action.
I think that under any circumstances, how we figure this out at the local level, that's absolutely the right place to go. And in fact, I was going to put this in correspondence today, but I didn't because I didn't want to get political with it. But both presidential candidates are talking about how they fund education. Both of them are pledging to move more money, more resources to the school. Yeah, I agree, April. You've heard it before. But you know what? It's that time of year. Senator Reid, everybody should be asked. I think it's a great thing to do, and it should come from the chair.
Is that a motion?
May I speak before the motion?
I'm just asking, Crawford, is that a
So,
motion?
yeah, I'm in a motion that we send the letter.
I'll second. I'll second.
No?
I would, Mr. Roth, you're right, and you're right. I was reading in the Washington Post, and to bring you up, the first COP money was a bill that Senator Reid put in when he was a congressman. So, rather than having another Columbine, and these kids, I've been in and out of these schools. Thank God, Dr. Stanton, that I don't have to ask you as a school committee member, can I go in a school? Thank God for you. I had to go to one of the schools, and they absolutely, one was gorgeous. If it was a rose, you'd say it was the most beautiful rose. To see those kids interacting with the cops, and things were quiet. It even gave the principal and the assistant principal time to do other things. They was checking it. So, not only Jack Reed, let's give this one to Senator Whitehouse. He's new. He's on the appropriation committee. Let's have the secretary to send a letter in the form of not a resolution, but asking him if he could put in something or revise it. Yeah, let's send it to White House. And then we won't be making it political because he's not up for election.
Okay,
You're absolutely right. It's from Maine to California.
Motion.
In fact, I read that. They had one in the Washington Post.
There's a motion, and it's been seconded to write to the legislation in terms of the COPS program, et cetera. Okay, so all those in favor?
Do we need to hear from public? Public.
Oh, sorry.
Probably clarification. You know that the town is paying for the COPS program this year.
I think the comment was that it goes beyond a town issue or a school department issue. It was federally funded. Well, obviously, the federal funds have dried up, and we're asking our federal legislators
To
to...
replace the town funds. But as you know, the town funds, the federal funds come and go, and that's why we're in the situation we're in
Right,
now.
absolutely.
It was funded, and it was unfunded, partially funded by the school committee and the town. Now the town is taking it over. So you don't have 3 this year, you have 2 that are funded by the town.
That's why
All the more
we
reason to ask for more federal funds so we can go back to having 3.
Okay.
We need 3. That's why we're asking them.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. B, appointment of policy subcommittee member for what? Was that just...
Well, I think that kind of goes back to, once we pass BDE for the sport committees, then if we have more than one person who wants to be in this policy subcommittee, then we draw them by lot. But right now, we don't have a procedure in place to put somebody on the subcommittee.
The policy.
Right, so, it was that hope that if we pass BDE, that then we would get to the next. So I guess I would say, just put that on the next agenda.
All right, and then C, kneecap scores as part of graduation requirements.
Just really quick, I'm hot off the press. Last week, we received the Regents Regulations update. I can cut to the chase for you. The document looks like this. The crux of the issue are lines 352 to 357. I'll summarize for you. You don't have to read it. The state test used to account for up to 10% of how kids graduate in Rhode Island. Nationally, states are moving away from high-stakes testing. We're moving towards high-stakes testing. High-stakes testing in and of itself isn't a bad thing always in terms of, looking at achievement, but what Rhode Island's currently doing is calling the state test one-third of the graduation. State test, grades and coursework, and then the senior project process, one-third, one-third, one-third. But oftentimes in Rhode Island, I think local control really trumps everything in the end, so regents have not told us what it'll look like. So I'm in trouble right now for two things bother me. The first thing bothers me is they haven't told us what it'll look like, so it might matter where you live or how we interpret graduation rates. The second thing is, I call it like the Apollo 13 syndrome. Remember the scene in Apollo 13? They dump the stuff on the table and say, here's a hair filter, make it work. They're telling RIDE right now, we haven't told you exactly how it's going to look. You figure that out. Here's part of the problem. They talk about how the word proficiency, or passing the bar, is a 3 in the kneecap test. 4 is wonderful, 3 is passing, 2 is almost, 1's low. 3 is proficiency. In the fine print, they're not saying here in this subject, I know the conversation, they're saying 2 is passing. So they're saying nearly proficient is good enough. First, I'm wondering why even have it if it's going to be nearly. The second problem I have is, here's the biggest problem. I know that night Superintendent Hicks from South Kingstown was quite eloquent, spoke on this. They talk about how, on one of the pages, if the student doesn't get a 2, he can provide other means to show proficiency. That opens up the door a mile wide, and then it's subjective. It's, well, what is this evidence? What's it look like? My fear is they won't define it enough. It'll be open to interpretation. It'll depend what district you live in. And RIDE right now is a problem right now. RIDE's problem in the past couple of years has been to do a thumbs up or thumbs down on 36 versions of the high school portfolio process. So it's very difficult. And they've done a good job trying to do it. So now the same thing again, we'll get a half-created idea pushed down to RIDE, and they have to now do some kind of calculation to figure out what's a third mean. So it's very troubling to me that they passed it like this, but that's what it is right now.
Could they say, we decided we don't like this and just completely drop it?
Drop what?
Any one of the thirds.
No, the Judge Flanders, the head of the Regents, and the Regents asked this. This is it.
Because we just spent a fortune on that software to do e-portfolio. I mean, we invested so much training and so much money in every one of these areas.
And the frustration for many would be, we spent 4 years doing this, now you're devaluing.
We're just almost getting the hang of it.
Yeah, and it's, Massachusetts has high stakes testing, and they did it in lieu of e-portfolio or the senior project. And they did it very consciously, saying, we don't want to spend the money, it was a cost decision. So they eliminated that piece of it, or didn't consider it, but they really carefully considered their high stakes test to make sure that it fit curricular guidance, and they put it in order and all that. What we've done here is exactly that. We're making, in my opinion, the Board of Regents are making reactionary decisions now that they're not really fully thinking through.
Here's part of the problem. They tried to, I think, be sensitive to folks. A lot of folks went there and said, my student doesn't do well in high-stakes testing. They tried to compromise. In compromising, they really it's kind of ruined this. If they want to take a stand, they should have took the stand. Third, 3 proficiency, that's it. They didn't. They said, now it's a 2, you're nearly proficient, and there are other ways to get that if you don't get the 2. So I would put this to you. Here's the last thing I'll say on this. The first round of grade 11 NECAP testing in the math, NK was third highest in the state at 47% of the kids proficient. Out of 3, right? So now picture some schools in Providence had 2% or less of the kids being proficient. That means those kids all have to show other means to get there. It opens up so many doors and so many strike zones, if you will. How do you ever get a handle on this? It's very slippery at this point.
Do you have a consensus among superintendents in the state that you've communicated with? Is there a consensus that we're going down the wrong path?
Absolutely.
Do school committees need to express that?
They have.
Do we need to do that formally?
Testified that evening.
I was going to say, I testified twice in front of the regents to go up and tell them they don't have a plan. And I said it many different ways, that they're basically giving us this, and they haven't thought about how we're going to make sure that the teachers are teaching up to the test. What does it mean if somebody doesn't pass the test? What does it mean if somebody then fails the test? How do they go about graduating? What are we going to do about educating parents for this? I mean, all these questions have been asked, and they've been asked more than once, because while I was up there twice, other members of the SIP group were up there 3 times, and letters were sent out. Exeter West Greenwich sent out a petition for over 2,000 names. So if they didn't hear us, then they had to be covering their ears. The fact is, it did change somewhat from the time we started talking about it in March into the final iteration. Obviously, it became very muddled. One of the questions is that they have to notify our 9th graders, because this is for 2012. They have to notify our 9th graders by October 1st, or this doesn't get done for the 9th grade, which means it'll be done for the current 8th graders. I don't think that they'll be able to notify the 9th graders by October 1st. So that means, okay, all our high school kids who are high school kids right now won't have to do it, but we just throw this problem then on our middle schoolers. And I do not think that high-stakes testing is the way to go. Because most states, like Massachusetts, has dialed back their specification. Washington has basically said their testing is flawed, and they've dropped it and going more toward the proficiency. Many states were looking at Rhode Island and our proficiency base and moving towards us. Now we've basically moved away from it. And it is a very political thing. The governor was very much of wanting to have high-stakes testing, so much so that one of the regions, when they said they weren't going to vote for it, is no longer a region. So, it is this sort of thing of, I don't agree with this, I don't like it. The question, I guess I would say, is how are we going to start measuring our students? We will be going back to a proficiency. If a student gets below the nearly proficient, will we say, how are they doing on their classes? Or what will we how are we going to say they pass or don't pass?
Currently being figured out. I can tell you, I volunteered our district as one of the groups to be involved as far as how do we figure this out. I'd rather be involved in the metric of it, have it done to me. So I volunteered us to work with the state assessment office to start to figure out what this looks like. The Apollo 13 thing to assemble the air filter. I'm part of that group to do that. It's going to take some time.
I also think that when we're talking about working with the assessment office, that office has changed dramatically in terms of personnel, so that we're looking at changes where there's probably more of a skeleton crew.
Just a quick snapshot of that.
Yes.
The 4 people I used to work with in that office are down to 2.
Yes.
I don't want to put Will on the spot, but I'm curious if you wanted to add any comment about what you think, as you've moved through it, what do you think about the difference between
Yeah, as someone who's gone through the system, and there's been significant classroom discussion on this topic in the last week, I can say most all students and teachers are opposed to the principle of high-stakes testing, just on the fact that why should a 2 or 3 hour test be in lieu of a whole semester or 2 of classwork. And so I think that's the general feeling at the high school anyway at this time.
Thank you.
We should all the high school students to put their voices together. That would have more of an impact than the parents.
I was going to say, may I speak?
Yes.
I think I called about 2 weeks ago and asked did we, as a school committee, subscribe to the Providence Business News.
Yeah, you did ask.
And for 2 weeks, this is the thing, and you're right in a certain extent. I think there's a push for this to get in before certain things happen. Because as of June, Mac Walters is leaving. That's his last term. All of the staffs, all the offices, and thank you, Dr. Cotton, for volunteering. That's the only way you're going to get in on the groundwork of it and be ready to say it. So I'll just put it down to this. George Flanders, I've seen the person that appointed him give him carte blanche, and everything like that. And we have sent people, thank you for going, and I keep up with it through other means, through the Providence Business News, and we're at a deep crossroad, and so many things are happening, but it reminds me of situations we used to have here. Everybody's trying to ingratiate their resume, so you can take it for what it's worth, but that's part of it. Somebody wanted on their resume to go to the next place. And we just have to have more input from the students.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, we have reports, special reports. I believe we have the CELAC report that we have here.
Oh, what did I put mine?
We need to just...
Yeah, I think we
Accept
approved,
it.
I think in the consent agenda, we approved the updated bylaws, and I don't have the email with me, and I can't quite remember off the top of my head. I don't know if anybody else remembers. I think basically if there were any questions, comments, or concerns, I think they were asking committee members to call or email them with any questions, comments, or concerns with their end-of-year report or the bylaws. The other subcommittees, one other thing with CELAC, they had their monthly meeting last night. I was unable to attend, but I did talk to some of the parents from the meeting, and I understand that Rachel Santer, our new special ed director, was in attendance at the meeting, and I know the parents were very glad that she was there and happy to have an opportunity to meet with her and have some informal discussions and roundtable discussions. So it's good things going on. As far as I have, last thing for subcommittees consolidation, as Karen mentioned, we have a meeting this Thursday at 4:30. Everyone should be receiving the meeting minutes through the emails that Karen sends out to the school committee. If someone has not received them, let Karen or I know, and I'll make sure they get to you. And I think in a more in-depth presentation on consolidation, where we are, where we're hoping to go, will be given at our joint meeting with the town council by Councilman Patterson and myself.
Thank you. Kim?
I don't have any questions with the CELAC report, but the last CELAC minutes we received said that they were going to endorse one of the political candidates for office, and that didn't seem to me that was the appropriate thing to do for a standing committee.
I don't know anything about that. I don't really know what, if any, standing the school committee or the administration has over what that subcommittee does, as far as if they decide to do that, or if they don't decide to do that, or if they're even having that discussion. Mary Ann, Phil?
Don't we have, I thought we had bylaws for the CELAC stuff.
They're right here.
Yeah. We have the bylaws, and it tells us what they can do and what they can't do.
I don't know if they speak to supporting a...
Political candidate?
There's nothing here that indicates support of political candidate.
I didn't think so.
So,
The only thing I would have on this, going back to the bylaws, did you have to draft these?
No.
It's just on section 3, it's just because it's a semantic change that happened with IDEA 04 when they revised it. It says a disabled person, we always put the person first, I mean, it's a semantic, but it's the person with disability. So throughout the wording of any of the stuff, special education documents, you always have to have the individual first.
I would just send them an email or a call to try to get some...
So there's nothing in the bylaws regarding that.
Yeah, but that silence doesn't make it right. I can tell you, if they've already decided they're going to start endorsing candidates, I hope that CLAC's put together a process to vet all candidates and that everyone's had equal access to offer their positions. Otherwise, people are going to start looking at CLAC as just a political arm. I know that I find it problematic. And I think maybe, while silent, they can do what they want, and they have First Amendment rights. Put a motion of telling people what they can and can't say is kind of absolutely wrong. Maybe some kind of guidance to explain that we hope they provide a process that's fair to everybody is in order.
I would suggest, like I said, I don't know. I would suggest that any community member or committee member that has a question or comment or concern direct it to the chair of CLAC or the representatives of CLAC. I don't know what the details of the discussion may or may not have been, and I don't know what the intentions are, so.
I think we would have to look at why CLAC came into existence. CLAC is a lobbying organization that is required by the federal government for parents, and not only parents but guardians of special needs children. So whether they endorse somebody or not, I think I do a little research on the federal level of CLAC and why the government required it, and before I would say what they can't do and brand them as a political organization. Because had it not been for lobbying, we would have never had a CLAC. And that came far before Mel Benson got on this school committee. And it was lobbied through Washington. The things that we have in place that are taking care of our special needs children are not the rules that they get up at the Shepherd Building. They are the rules that came from Congress, and there were reasons. There were reasons for these rules. And they are a great lobbying organization, just like the Disabled American Veterans and so forth. We're just only the conveyor of what they get, simply because we have a school system and the money for our children come through the town to us. So before we go into all of this, not political, and asking them to do this and that and the other, maybe, and I know we should, have them to look in the book, the latest rules on special needs. I think one of our congressmen made one available. Do you have it in the office, Karen?
We have the rules and
the 19
laws of
the
education.
1980, what is this, 202? I think the new ones came in this is 208, in 204, 205, when they changed the whole situation. So some of you that's good with computers and get that you need and get off of it and get that you don't need, look it up. It was something established by Congress.
I believe that it was established by Congress, but I don't believe that in anywhere in the bylaws it indicates that they will be endorsing candidates. I can tell you that. Right. Okay, so let's move right on. The next thing
I don't
is...
think anything in there, Janice, would keep them for a lot.
I understand, but we're referring to the endorsement piece. That's not the mission of CLAC. Okay, so any other, I believe there was just one more committee report. I think, Mel, you had submitted that under correspondence.
Yes, I have.
Did you want Karen to read that?
I can read it. I asked her if she would make some copies.
Okay.
Did you get a chance?
We haven't taken a break.
Sorry.
Just got to look them over here.
Well, now let's don't take a break. Let's take a go. And I'll be listening.
Okay, we're going to try to make a 10.
You're almost there.
As I stated, due to request of a school committee member, former president, former chairman, we wanted information on the facility committee. And as I was beginning to state that as a volunteer to the committee, and the people that all of you named, you got a nice group on that committee. You named very nice people because you named people who had know-how in that field. The committee elected Mr. Dick Welch, who is one of the builders, and the committee consists of Richard Welch, Phil Thornton, Mel Draper, and Luke Holmes. Absent, this was already formed, and thank you for coming. Absent that day in August was Donna Berg excused, David Caldwell excused, Louise DiCarlo, Dewey Cattell excused, Robin Merrick excused, Mark Plimpton, and Dr. Roy Seisinger. A very good cable community. Having no quorum, this goes back to what we've discussed here in bylaws. We were unable to proceed with the discussion or vote to recommend. They did not schedule a meeting in July, and he contacted Karen in the middle of August to get a meeting scheduled in August, but was told that the schedule with school opening and things, so they will have a meeting September the 30th. And I think you'll be very pleased in my keeping up with the members on that committee. I called them and asked them how you're getting along and this, that, and the other. And also, maybe they might have a resignation. I see that you sent an email to Karen and said if they had a vacancy, that you would be willing to serve. I will be at the meeting as the representative, and I will see Mr. Welch and ask him. He sent out. Did you send out something, Karen, asking people if they felt that it was too much work?
Yes, if they could make the meeting and if they still wanted to be part
You
of
get
it.
reports back when you volunteer for a committee, Mr. Roth. By the way, you are included in the things that come from here. I've kept up with the meeting, but I can't keep up with the interactions that go on here in the school department because I'm not informed about some of them. But I did get your email stating that you would like to be on the committee, and after a couple of more meetings, I think I will let you be the representative. I think you'll do a good job. You're in finance, and they'll probably get to that stage where they need some good financial advice. So that's my report.
Yeah, I reacted to the note that we got from the chairman of the subcommittee that said the meetings have been poorly attended. I know that we've gone through changes and we're all kind of working through different challenges, but that subcommittee, in my opinion, is one of the most important ones there are. And when we were considering reconfiguration and moving kids around, trying to determine what long-term plans are, and I know that one thing that I'm sensitive to, because I've received emails and phone calls that people are asking for, where is the long-term plan? Getting a recap of the meeting minutes where people didn't attend is great, but at some point, Mrs. Benson, being the liaison, I'd like to understand a recap of the year's events and just get an understanding of what buildings you guys have looked at, what you might be thinking in terms of what gets added on to, what's in the long-term plan. It's great to talk about administrative minutes, but I would like to hear, I think people want to hear at some point, what the real long-term plan is. And I didn't hear that. I haven't heard anything.
I'll give you what you want to hear, but I think the long-term plan, it was designed with the idea, the capacity to work along with the configuration committee. And as much work as they did, and you didn't understand it and didn't have enough information, I don't know what I can give you. But I will contact the members, and I will inform them that we need a long-term plan. And the long-term plan were mixed in with, they didn't meet together, but some of the things were related to that. So maybe we should have a meeting of the two committees together, and we will be able to see, because it is very important.
Reconfiguration is done.
Is done.
Yeah.
But nobody.
They're done. They can't
They
meet
didn't have
anymore.
enough information.
Well, can I just suggest that maybe now that summer's winding to an end and hopefully meetings are better attended once they're able to have some meetings, maybe Mr. Welch, the chairman of that subcommittee, could give an overview or presentation to the school committee as far as an update. So maybe if you just make mention of that to him.
Okay, I will contact him and do my best to get him here for the next meeting. And I've never been able to get anything on the agenda, so you asked.
No, I'm not, Mr. Benson, I'm asking for the report.
Thank you.
Okay, you asked for the report, because I don't
Committee
get it on the
members' comments. Any comments?
Anybody knows, but...
Larry?
No, I recognize you.
I just have a comment or a question. I just, thinking back to a discussion and a vote earlier in the night, I just kind of need to have a better understanding. When we originally had a discussion and a vote to forego school committee member stipends, Kim had brought up a point which it turns out in hindsight she was correct, that vote could possibly be violating the town charter. So we were correct, it turns out, after receiving an opinion from our legal counsel. And that was a motion that I had actually made and put forward. So it was incorrect, and it did violate the town charter. So now we ask the question that you had asked yourself that evening, to legal counsel, if in fact we did violate town charter by taking that vote. The answer is yes. Our action was in violation of the town charter. So I'm not quite sure I understand when we take a vote that puts us in compliance with the town charter, which you expressed your concern that we weren't in compliance, we were coming out of compliance with the town charter. Now we take a vote to be in compliance with the town charter, which you expressed that we needed to be. Why you would vote no? And obviously you're under no obligation to comment or answer me, but I just need to, I'm looking for an understanding as to...
I'll tell you, I feel as if ethically I shouldn't be voting on to give myself money. And that's what, and I know your motion has stated that it's merely to remove the vote from before, but I still feel as if I'm voting to give myself money, and ethically, I don't think I should be doing that vote. So that's my reason for voting no.
Voting against being in the compliance with the town charter?
I'm voting against giving myself money.
Okay.
That's how I saw the vote. So that's why I saw it ethically, I couldn't take that vote.
We're going to qualify our votes, and I'm going to indicate that the reason I voted yes is because I'm leaving the committee, and I don't think I should vote no for someone who's walking into the committee and being non-compliant.
But you know how much work it is, what you're doing.
I've said repeatedly when I was the one who first put forward the motion to forego our stipends that on a voluntary individual basis I have donated every one of my stipends, and that's a personal decision that I've made. But I just felt there's a show of spreading the pain and leadership that we forego our stipends. That was my intent. Turns out that my intent was not in compliance with the charter. So I just, like I said, I just looking for clarification, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Just real quick, Chance, I did want to comment real quick on subcommittees. We do have a meeting Friday of the Budget Subcommittee. We are getting back into the budget season. We started putting the budget calendar together, and those are the steps we're going to take, and we'll have a set of meetings scheduled after that. Also, last meeting we had voted to go ahead and appoint 3 of us to act as the subcommittee towards other district school committees on consolidation issues. And you and I had mentioned that we're going to draft a letter of communication to Jamestown and East Greenwich to begin to initiate those discussions. I'll have that draft to you this week for your signature and for your consideration. And then from there, we'll schedule the appropriate meetings and we'll report accordingly to the committee, if that works for you. And then finally, on the vote, just to kind of comment here, I don't agree that it's in violation of the charter. We can do what we think we need to do. We can turn away the money. We can do whatever we have to. I would caution the school committee to not, and that's nothing against council, but not to abrogate its responsibility to vote on different issues like this just based on what council says. Council's not a referee.
Can we try to end on it? Let's hold it.
I just have to say something.
We're almost finished with the end of the comments. Go ahead,
I
Mel.
just have to say something.
Sorry.
The town charter has been in this town longer than you and I. They have charter revisions committee. I would advise you to get that idea out and give it to the charter revision committee, because it is a standing committee. And at my last knowing about it, I think Mr. Wilson was chairman of the charter revision committee. And the next question I want to say, what law school did you graduate from?
I didn't, Ms. Benson, but the reading comprehension is a part of what we do. And no word of a lie, ahead of this discussion, Dr. Francis, I pulled out the town charter. I can highlight at least no less than a dozen different areas that that we are in non-compliance with the charter, that we act out all the time. And if we're going to do that and bounce the charter as a mechanism to overturn and make things happen at this level, then we need to consider it completely. And my point is that, at times it makes sense, but all I'm saying is in cautioning the committee not to try to circumvent the electoral process, just the votes, by going to get a favorable opinion one direction or another, because that starts to put people at odds. Voting originally wasn't a bad thing. Revoting again wasn't a bad thing. And I would ask that council recommend that we rescind votes, move votes.
What's that
instead of
sound?
issuing it. That's it.
Have you been to the council and explained?
I'm not going to engage in Q&A with that.
No, because I don't want to engage with you, because you're not going to send me to jail.
No, Kim.
Never heard.
This isn't on what has been talked about. I'm not going to even go there. Mr. Ruff, you had the Budget Committee meeting for Friday, the 12th, and I think I must have misunderstood you when you were asking me about what Fridays are available, because on the 12th I have...
Oh, you went Thursday, didn't you?
Yes, I thought we were doing it on a Thursday. I didn't realize. So if we've already missed our deadline, you can have it, but I won't be able to be there on the 12th, as I have a work commitment.
So I'll follow up with the superintendent and Karen tomorrow. We'll talk about that and we'll try to reschedule the process. My apologies. Sorry about that, Kim.
Sorry. I know it's going out here tonight that we put it on the calendar and that sort of thing, and I wanted to say something earlier. I thought we'd take a break, but we didn't.
Okay, we're all set with comments, thank you. Any citizens' comments?
Citizens' comments.
There's no citizens' comments, sorry.
Motion
to adjourn. Yes.
to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Let's keep this for the record, 10:07.
Hooray.
And the entire agenda.
I also wonder it was too late to ask for it to be exempted. Can you clarify why on this page
Thanks for coming out.
$2 and then back here?
Must be you, Will, that we ended early, because we don't usually end this early.
Yeah.
That's right.